I never thought I'd have a story for this sub, but after what happened at my last family reunion, I think I finally do. For context, my name is Ryan, and I'm 26. My family is complicated. I wouldn't call them outright toxic, but they have this unshakable tendency to put people into neat little boxes based on outdated ideas of success. If you're a doctor, lawyer, or businessman, you're a golden child. If you chose a different path, especially one that doesn't fit their idea of prestige, you're a joke. Guess which category they put me in? I work in digital marketing. Not the glamorous, high-end corporate kind, but the type that involves freelancing, content creation, and helping small businesses grow online. It's a job I love. I make good money, more than enough to support myself, but because it doesn't come with an impressive title or an office in some high-rise building, my family never took it seriously. I'm used to the passive-aggressive comments, the little digs, the condescending questions about whether I have a real job yet. Normally, I just let it slide. But this time, something changed. The family reunion was held at my Aunt Linda's house, a big 2-story place with a backyard large enough to fit 3 generations of relatives. These gatherings happened every summer, and I had learned to manage my expectations. I enjoyed seeing my younger cousins, my grandma, and the handful of relatives who weren't insufferable. But I also knew I'd have to endure the inevitable interrogation about my life choices. Uncle Mike was the worst about it. He was my dad's older brother, a man who had built his entire identity around being the successful sibling. He ran a car dealership, though from what I'd heard through the grapevine, it wasn't doing all that well. Didn't matter. To him, success wasn't about how well you were actually doing. It was about looking the part, wearing the right suit, driving the right car, having the right title. I was sitting at one of the patio tables, chatting with my cousin Jake about a trip he had just taken to Italy, when I heard the all-too-familiar voice behind me. Well, if it isn't the family disappointment. The words hit like a slap, loud enough for everyone around to hear. Conversation slowed. A few people chuckled awkwardly, the kind of laugh people give when they don't want to be part of something but also don't want to challenge it. I forced a smile before turning around. "Good to see you too, Uncle Mike." He had his usual drink in hand, sunglasses perched on his head, the smugness practically radiating off of him. "You still doing that internet stuff?" he asked, waving his hand vaguely. "You know, my buddy's kid just got a job at a big firm. Finance. Real money. But he's making a lot more than whatever TikTok nonsense you do." I exhaled slowly, already regretting being here. "I don't do TikTok. I work in digital marketing." Right? Marketing." He turned to my dad, who was sitting nearby. "Remember when Ryan wanted to be an engineer? Man, what a downgrade, huh?" More laughter. I glanced at my mom, hoping she'd say something, but she just gave me that look, the one that meant don't make a scene. Mike grinned, clearly enjoying himself. "Hey, at least he's not in jail or homeless, right? We should be grateful for the little things." And that was when I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. I pushed my chair back and stood up, feeling my heart pound in my chest. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The table went quiet. "You know, Uncle Mike," I said, my voice steady but sharp. I wasn't going to say anything. But since we're talking about success, maybe it's time the whole family knew a little secret. Mike's smirk faltered. I tapped the screen. The silence stretched across the patio. Conversations had died, and I could feel the weight of every gaze shifting toward me. My uncle's smirk wavered, but he recovered quickly, letting out a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on, Ryan," he scoffed. "What? You gonna Google something to prove me wrong? Maybe show us some made-up numbers from whatever website you run." I ignored him and held up my phone, the screen glowing in the evening light. My hands were steady now. I wasn't backing down. "You like talking about success, right?" I said, my voice even. "You like comparing careers? Fine. Let's compare." I turned the screen toward him. It was a screenshot. My most recent invoice from a client, one of the biggest contracts I'd ever landed. The total amount? $22,500. A murmur rippled through the family. Someone let out a low whistle. My younger cousin, Jake, leaned forward, eyes wide. "No way. That's legit." I nodded. 1 month. From one client. For the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar flicker across Uncle Mike's face, uncertainty. He scoffed, but it didn't have the same bite as before. "Well, sure, but that's just one big payout. No way that's consistent. It's not like you have a stable job or benefits or..." I swiped again, pulling up my earnings tracker for the year. I tilted the phone so he could see. $190,000. More whispers. More eyes widening. Holy, Jake started, but my aunt shot him a look before he could finish. Uncle Mike swallowed, his expression shifting, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. That doesn't mean, I cut him off. Now, let's talk about your dealership. His face paled. I glanced down at my phone again, scrolling to something else. See, I wasn't going to bring this up, because unlike you, I don't think someone's entire worth is based on their job. But since you clearly do, let's go over a few things. I tapped the screen, and this time, I wasn't showing an invoice. I was showing a news article. And right there, in bold letters, was the headline, "Local car dealership under investigation for fraudulent loan practices." The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from Uncle Mike's face. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. The entire patio was silent, every pair of eyes locked onto the headline glowing from my phone screen. Aunt Linda was the first to break the silence. What is that? I turned the phone so she and everyone else could see it clearly. It's an article from 2 weeks ago. Talks about a certain car dealership that's been under investigation for shady financing practices. Falsifying loan applications, inflating interest rates without customer consent, repossessing cars over clerical errors that weren't actually errors. I looked up, locking eyes with Uncle Mike. Sound familiar? His face was now a shade of red I'd never seen before. That's just rumors, he snapped, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. Some foolish customers didn't read their contracts, and now they want to blame the business. The media will print anything these days. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? I swiped again and pulled up another screenshot, this time from the Better Business Bureau. A full page of formal complaints against his dealership, each one detailing nearly the exact same fraudulent tactics mentioned in the article. I read one out loud. I was told my loan was approved at 4.2%, only to find out later they had signed me at 9.7% without my knowledge. When I confronted them, they threatened to repossess my car unless I paid cash up front. I glanced at him. Classy business move, Uncle Mike. Someone sucked in a breath. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mike let out a forced laugh, but it sounded strangled. This is ridiculous. You can't believe everything you read online. Sure, I said, nodding. Except for the part where the state attorney general is now involved. I swiped one last time and pulled up a legal document, a public filing from the attorney general's office, confirming an active investigation into fraudulent lending practices at his dealership. Uncle Mike froze. My stomach was a knot of adrenaline, but I kept my voice calm. So tell me again, Uncle Mike. Who's the family disappointment here? The murmurs turned into full-blown whispers. My Aunt Linda looked mortified. My mom had her hand over her mouth. Even my dad, who had never once stood up for me in these family gatherings, was looking at his brother like he'd just seen him for the first time. Uncle Mike clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but the fight in his voice was gone. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe the entire family just found out that the guy who's been lecturing me about real jobs is facing potential fraud charges. Silence. Then my cousin Jake, bless him, let out a low whistle. Damn, Ryan. You really did your homework. I pocketed my phone and gave Uncle Mike one last look. Yeah, turns out, researching things is part of my internet job. And with that, I turned and walked back inside. I didn't need to hear what happened next. The damage was done. I didn't stick around after that. The moment I stepped inside the house, I grabbed my keys and walked straight out the front door. I wasn't in the mood for more fake laughter, awkward glances, or hushed conversations about what had just happened. I had said what I needed to say. Let them deal with it. As I drove away, I could still feel the tension in my chest. Years of biting my tongue, enduring the backhanded comments, letting them make me feel like I wasn't enough. It had all built up to that moment. And for once, I didn't regret standing up for myself. Still, I wasn't expecting what happened next. A week later, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Uncle Mike. I let it ring. A minute later, another call. Then a third. Then a text. Ryan, we need to talk. Call me back. It's important. I ignored it. Whatever mess he had found himself in, it wasn't my problem. Then another text came through. Please. That made me pause. Mike was a lot of things, arrogant, condescending, full of himself, but he wasn't the type to say please. Curious, I answered his next call. Ryan. He started immediately, his voice low, almost urgent. Listen, Kid, I know things got heated at the reunion, but I need to talk to you about something serious. I didn't say anything, just waited. He cleared his throat. I might be in a little bit of a financial bind. I almost laughed. A bind? He exhaled sharply, like he was trying to keep himself from losing his temper. Yeah, a bind. Look, you obviously keep track of things online. You know about the investigation. It's complicated. The legal fees alone are ruining me, and the bad press has scared off a lot of customers. If I don't come up with some serious cash soon, I could lose everything. I leaned back in my chair. And what does this have to do with me? There was a long pause. Then, with what sounded like actual reluctance, he said, I need a loan. I blinked. A loan? Just something to hold me over, he rushed on. I know you're doing well for yourself. You proved that at the reunion. You've got the money, Ryan. I just need a little help to get through this rough patch. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, pretending to consider them. Then I said, You mean you need help from the family disappointment? Silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. He knew exactly what I was doing. Ryan, he said finally, his voice tight. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered every insult. Every time he mocked my career. Every time he made me feel like I was lesser because I didn't fit into his narrow idea of success. I took a slow breath. And then I made my decision. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment while I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to sit in it, to really feel it, to understand what it was like to be on the other end of his treatment, what it was like to be the one asking for something and not knowing if he'd get it. Then, finally, I exhaled. You know, Mike, it's funny. For years, I've listened to you run your mouth about me, about my job, about how I'm supposedly some kind of failure. I chuckled, shaking my head. And now here we are. The successful businessman is calling the disappointment because he needs money. His voice hardened instantly. I wouldn't have to call you if things weren't so complicated, Ryan. You think I planned for this? No, I said. But I did. That shut him up. I continued, my voice calm, measured. See, while you were busy playing the big shot at family gatherings, laughing at my so-called internet job, I was actually planning for my future. I built something sustainable. I saved money. I invested. I didn't blow it all on fancy cars and golf trips. His breath hitched slightly, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. You have no idea what it takes to run a business, he snapped. Maybe not a car dealership under investigation for fraud. I shot back. He growled, and I could practically hear him grinding his teeth on the other end. Ryan, listen to me, he said, forcing his voice to sound controlled. I get it, okay? You had your little mic drop moment at the reunion. You made your point. But this isn't just about me. I've got a family to take care of. If I go under, a lot of people suffer. I scoffed. Now you care about people suffering? He ignored that. I'm asking for a loan, not a handout. I'll pay you back. With interest. We can even put it in writing if that makes you feel better. I let out a long sigh. And how exactly do you plan to pay me back, Mike? If your business is hemorrhaging money, if you're barely staying afloat, if you're already drowning in legal fees, where's my money supposed to come from? He hesitated. Things will turn around. I laughed, shaking my head. Yeah? You really think people are going to forget about all this? That customers will just magically trust you again? I have connections, Ryan, he snapped. I know people. Once this blows over, I'll be fine. Then ask those people for money, I said simply. Silence. And then, for the first time, I heard it. The sheer desperation in his breathing. He wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. He was panicking. Ryan, I can't ask them, he admitted, his voice low. They're already pulling away. Investors are backing out. My own business partner is talking about jumping ship. I don't have a lot of options left. I sat there, absorbing that. The invincible Uncle Mike, the self-proclaimed business genius, the same man who had spent years looking down on me, was now at his breaking point. He wasn't just struggling, he was sinking, and no one wanted to throw him a life raft. No one except me, if I wanted to. And that was the real kicker. Because the old me, the one who used to sit there and take his insults, that version of me might have felt bad, might have wanted to be the bigger person, might have thought, if I help him now, maybe he'll finally respect me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I exhaled slowly. I'm going to tell you something, Mike. And I want you to listen carefully. He didn't respond. I continued. For my entire life, you've treated me like I was beneath you. Every family gathering, Every conversation, every time you opened your mouth, it was always the same. When are you going to get a real job, Ryan? When are you going to stop wasting your time? When are you going to grow up? His breathing was heavier now, but he stayed silent. I kept going, and I took it, for years, because I thought maybe, one day, you'd actually see me for who I am. That maybe, if I proved myself, you'd finally stop looking down on me. I let out a dry chuckle. And you know what? I did prove myself. I'm making more money than you ever did. I built something real. And now, the guy who mocked me for not having a real job is begging me for money. That one hit hard. I felt it through the phone. So tell me, Mike, I said, why would I help you now? His composure cracked. Because I'm your family. Ryan, he exploded. That's why? Because family doesn't turn their backs on each other. I let that hang in the air for a second before responding, my voice ice cold. Funny, you didn't seem to care about that when you were calling me the family disappointment. Silence. And then, I heard it. The shift. The moment his desperation turned into rage. Oh, I see how it is, he sneered. You're still some insecure little punk, aren't you? You think just because you got lucky with some internet money, you're better than me? I smirked. I don't think it, Mike. I know it. He lost it. You ungrateful little brat, he spat. I've been in business longer than you've been alive. You think your little online gig makes you smarter than me? You think it makes you successful? You're still just some nobody with a laptop, sitting in his apartment, pretending he's a big deal. Meanwhile, I built a real business. I had employees. I had assets. I had a business. I interrupted. Had. Past tense. The silence that followed was deafening. He was fuming, but I wasn't done yet. You want to talk about success, Mike? Let's talk about it. Because real success isn't just about money. It's about respect. It's about trust. And right now, you have neither. Your customers don't trust you. Your business partners don't trust you. Your own family doesn't trust you. And that's not because of me. That's because of you. He had nothing. No comeback. No defense. Just heavy, angry breathing. I let out a slow breath. You burned every bridge, Mike. You ran your mouth for years, and now, when you finally need help, there's no one left. And then, for the final blow, welcome to being the family disappointment. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt free. It's been a few months since that phone call, and honestly, I haven't heard much from Uncle Mike since. Word spread fast through the family that I refused to help him, and, predictably, there was some backlash. My mom called me a few days after it happened, saying I should have been the bigger person. My aunt tried to guilt-trip me with the whole "buddy's family" speech. A few cousins texted me, basically fishing for gossip. But here's the thing, I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. Mike wasn't some innocent guy who hit a rough patch. He was a grown man who spent his entire life belittling others while pretending he was untouchable. And when the walls finally closed in on him, he had the audacity to expect me, the person he looked down on the most, to save him. From what I've heard, things haven't improved for him. His business officially shut down, and the investigation against him is still ongoing. Last I checked, he had to sell his fancy car and downgrade his house. I don't know where he's getting the money to keep himself afloat, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's burning through whatever savings he has left. As for me, I'm doing great. Better than ever, actually. That whole situation made me realize just how far I've come. I spent so many years letting his words get to me, feeling like I had something to prove. But I don't anymore. I know my worth. I know what I've built. And I know that cutting off toxic family members, no matter how much society tells you to stick by them, is sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should have just given him the money, let bygones be bygones, and played the role of the bigger person. What do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did Uncle Mike get exactly what he deserved? I was 15 the first time I realized my parents didn't see me as their son, at least, not in the way you'd expect a parent to see their child. To them, I was a tool, a spare, a fallback plan, in case things didn't work out with their real pride and joy. My younger brother, Owen. He was 13 at the time, a bright kid with a loud laugh and a knack for getting exactly what he wanted. I used to envy him for that. Until I realized the price of being the favorite was never hearing the word no, even when he needed to. And the price of being me was being forgotten, until they needed something. My name's Henry. I'm 27 now. But this story, this disaster, really, starts years before that, when I packed a single duffel bag, slid out the back door, and left behind the peeling paint and echoing silence of a house that never really felt like home. I didn't leave because I had some grand escape plan. I left because I was tired of trying. Tired of pouring effort into a family that only ever filled my cup with guilt and obligation. I was just a kid with a part-time job at a gas station and a stack of textbooks from the public library. But somehow, walking away from everything familiar felt less terrifying than staying. I didn't expect to make it. Honestly, part of me thought I'd come crawling back within a week. But I didn't. I slept in shelters, picked up shifts wherever I could find them, and took online classes on borrowed Wi-Fi until I could afford community college. I kept my head down, worked through summers and weekends, and slowly clawed my way towards something that resembled stability. I didn't tell anyone from my old life where I was. I figured they wouldn't ask. And they didn't. Not for a long time. That's the part that always stings more than I care to admit. Not that I left, but that no one came looking. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a passing email to ask if I was alive. I could have been in a ditch or halfway across the country, and it wouldn't have mattered. I was a ghost the moment I stopped being useful. It's funny how silence says more than words ever could. But life went on. I got a job in tech after graduation, landed a decent role at a startup that later got bought out, and saved everything I could. I wasn't rich, not by Bay Area standards, but I was doing all right. I lived modestly. No flashy car. No designer clothes. Just a quiet little two-bedroom house on the edge of town with a mortgage I'd finally paid down enough to breathe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every square foot, every light fixture, every screw in the drywall was something I'd earned. Alone. Then, out of nowhere, they called. I remember the number flashing on my screen. Unfamiliar, but vaguely familiar. Like the ghost of a memory you can't quite place. I let it go to voicemail. I stared at the little notification bubble for a full hour before I worked up the nerve to play it. Henry, this is your father. We need to talk. It's about Owen. That was it. No hello. No how are you. Just straight to business. I played it twice, just to make sure I wasn't imagining the iciness in his voice. It had been over a decade since I'd heard from them, and the first thing they said was, "We need to talk." Not, "We missed you." Not, "We're sorry." Not even a basic, "Are you okay?" I should have deleted it. Should have blocked the number and moved on like I always had. But some pathetic, wounded part of me wanted to know what they could possibly want after all this time. So I called back. "Henry," my dad said, as if he was picking up a conversation we'd only just paused. "Glad you called. Look, I'll get straight to it. Your brother's going through a rough patch." I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. He's had some setbacks. Dropped out of college. Lost his job. Couple of bad decisions. Nothing serious. But he needs a fresh start. A clean slate. My stomach tightened. I already knew where this was going. I could hear it in his tone. That edge of expectation, like a knife being slowly unsheathed. "We know you've done well for yourself," he continued. "Your mother and I talked it over, and we think it's only fair that you help. Family supports each other, right?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd it was practically surreal. "You want me to what exactly?" I said slowly. "Well, Owen's staying with us for now, but we were thinking, maybe you could give him a portion of what you have. Help him buy a place. Get on his feet. Half, maybe. You've got your house, your career. He deserves a chance too." I was quiet for a beat too long, and my dad jumped in again. "It's not like we're asking for much. Just a fair split. You're both our sons." That word, fair, rang in my ears like a siren. Fair. Like it was fair when they told me I was on my own at 15. Like it was fair when Owen got private school and tutoring while I taught myself calculus behind a gas station counter. Like it was fair when they replaced every "we love you" with "you should have been more like your brother." "Dad," I said, and my voice was calm in a way that scared even me. "Are you seriously asking me to give Owen half of everything I've built?" After everything. There was a pause. Then, like he hadn't heard me at all, he said, "It's not just about you, Henry. You owe your brother a future. He's family." That word again. Family. As if they hadn't shredded that idea years ago and left me to bleed out on the pavement. I hung up. That should have been the end of it. Another phone call I try to forget. Another wound to bury. But 2 weeks later, I got a knock on the door. A man in a buttoned shirt handed me a thick envelope and said, "You've been served." I opened it, hands shaking, and felt the world tilt beneath me. It was a civil claim, filed by my parents. On behalf of Owen. They were suing me. Their argument? That as his older brother, someone who'd benefited from family support and emotional labor, I nearly choked on that part. I was morally and financially obligated to provide Owen with half my assets. They cited familial expectation, unfair enrichment, and intentional alienation. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so utterly deranged. But the worst part wasn't the papers. It wasn't the legal jargon or the nerve of it all. It was the attached statement from Owen. Typed. Signed. I believe my brother has a duty to share what he has. Our parents always said we'd be equals. I trusted that. I trusted him. As if I'd betrayed him. As if I owed him anything. I sat on my porch for hours after that, the envelope limp in my lap, my coffee gone cold beside me. I thought of every night I spent hungry, every shift I took to afford books, every time I'd sat in the back row of a lecture hall with secondhand clothes and dollar store pens while Owen got new backpacks and name-brand shoes and a ride to school every morning. And now they wanted half. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Hardened. Because if they were going to drag me into court and paint me as the villain, then I was going to make sure they regretted ever putting my name in their mouths. But I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explain myself. No, I was going to show them exactly who I'd become without them. And I had a plan. I just needed to wait for the right moment to strike. And that moment? It came the day I walked into the courtroom, sat alone at my table, and saw their faces when the judge asked if the defendant had prepared a closing statement. I stood. I cleared my throat. And I read every word I'd written. That was the moment their faces turned pale. That was the moment Owen stopped looking me in the eye. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened first. Let me show you exactly how far they went, and how I made sure they'd never forget it. They say you can't miss what you never had. But that's a lie. Because even after all these years, after everything I'd survived and built on my own, there was still a small, aching part of me that longed for a family that cared. Not a perfect one. Not even a good one. Just one that acknowledged I existed beyond what I could provide. I guess that's what made the betrayal sting more than I thought it would. Not just because of what they were doing, but because of who they still saw me as. A wallet. A workhorse. A backup plan. The days after the lawsuit was filed felt like walking through molasses. I wasn't panicking, not outwardly, but I couldn't focus on anything. My work performance dipped. I barely touched my food. I started checking my locks twice a night, not because I was scared of them showing up, but because I felt violated, invaded. My sanctuary, my home, the one thing I had truly earned, was suddenly under siege by the very people who'd abandoned me. I didn't respond to the claim right away. I waited, watched, tried to see if it was some kind of bluff, a twisted scare tactic. Maybe they'd come to their senses. Maybe they'd realize how insane it all sounded. But a week later, I got another envelope, this time from their attorney. A formal notice of the hearing date, accompanied by documentation to support their case. Emails, texts, photos of our childhood, school report cards, even a single, blurry picture of me standing next to Owen at some backyard barbecue when we were kids, like it proved we'd been close. Like it meant anything. I read every page. And with every sentence, every manipulative half-truth, my blood pressure rose a little more. They had rewritten our entire history. I wasn't the kid who ran away because he was abandoned. I was the ungrateful son who cut off contact. Owen wasn't the golden child who coasted through life. He was the misguided little brother who'd always looked up to me. My parents? Oh, they were saints. Heartbroken. Always hoping I'd come back. Always waiting with open arms. Except they never once tried to find me. Never once asked why I left. Never once reached out. Not until it became convenient for them. It wasn't just insulting. It was dangerous. They were crafting a narrative that made me look like a cold, selfish adult who'd simply gotten lucky and decided to hoard it. And Owen, poor Owen, the victim of an emotionally distant older brother who had the means to help and simply refused. I wanted to scream, but instead I wrote. I started keeping a journal, at first just to organize my thoughts for court, but it quickly became more than that. A lifeline, a mirror, a reminder that I wasn't crazy. I filled page after page with memories. Real ones. Sharp, detailed, painful. Like the time I'd asked for new shoes in 9th grade because mine had holes, and my mom said, maybe if you didn't drag your feet so much, they'd last longer. Then, 3 days later, they bought Owen a pair of Jordans for doing well on his math quiz. Or my 16th birthday. I'd saved up to buy myself a small ice cream cake. Left it in the freezer, planning to eat it after my shift. I came home to find it half-eaten, with Owen's name carved into it in frosting. I figured you bought it for the family, my mom had said with a shrug when I confronted her. It's not a big deal. Except it was. Every small thing added up. Every dismissal, every silent shrug, every time they made me feel like an afterthought. It had all been groundwork for this moment. And now that I was no longer a quiet, invisible kid, but a man with something they wanted, they were rewriting it all. That was the breaking point. Not the lawsuit itself. Not even Owen's signed statement. It was the realization that they still didn't see me. Not really. They saw a resource. A missed opportunity. A safety net. But never Henry. Not the son who slept on benches between shifts. Not the teenager who carried 2 jobs and still showed up to night classes. Not the man who taught himself how to fix plumbing because he couldn't afford to call someone when his rental bathroom flooded. They saw what I had, not how I got it. And that's when I decided I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd make this hurt. Not out of spite. Not even out of revenge. But because they needed to understand that I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. That night, I made a decision. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years, Miss Carter, my high school guidance counselor. She'd been the only adult who ever truly believed me when I told her things weren't right at home. The one who pulled strings to get me meal vouchers when I was couch surfing. Who slipped me bus passes without making a scene. Who printed college applications for me behind the library desk and let me use the office phone to call shelters. I found her email through the school district site and sent a message I thought would go unanswered. But 2 days later, I got a reply. Henry, I never forgot about you. Call me. We spoke for an hour. By the end of it, she'd agreed to write a statement. Sworn. Signed. Dated. A full account of my final year in school. What I'd been through. What she'd witnessed. The time she tried to contact my parents, and they brushed her off. The teachers who pooled money to buy me a cap and gown for graduation. The time she found me asleep in the school supply closet because I hadn't had anywhere else to go. It wasn't just a character statement. It was proof. Proof that they hadn't supported me. Proof that I'd done this alone. I felt like I could finally breathe. But of course, the universe wasn't done testing me. Because a week before the hearing, I got an unexpected visit. It was Owen. He showed up unannounced, wearing joggers, a designer hoodie, and sneakers I could never afford at his age. He had the same crooked smile I remembered from when we were kids, the one that used to mean, I'm about to get away with something. Hey man, he said casually, like this wasn't the first time we'd spoken in over a decade. Can we talk? I didn't open the door all the way, just leaned against the frame. What do you want? He shrugged. Look, I know the lawsuit's kinda intense, but it's not personal. Mom and Dad just think it's the right thing. You know how they are. I said nothing. He went on. I'm not trying to take your life or anything. I just need a leg up. A clean slate. I messed up. Yeah, but you've got so much. I mean, come on, this place. You've got your own house. You probably make 6 figures. It was the way he said it. Like it was all handed to me. Like I'd spun a wheel and landed on a jackpot. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice low. Where were you when I was sleeping in a shelter on Mission and 8th? When I was walking 6 miles to class because I couldn't afford the bus? He blinked. I didn't know about any of that. Exactly, I said. Because you never asked. He shifted uncomfortably. Okay, but still. You're in a position to help. Isn't that what family does? There it was. The same script. The same guilt. Only now, it was coming from my brother instead of my parents. I did help you, I said. By leaving. By not dragging you down with me. By surviving without ever asking you for a damn thing. He stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, You really think you're better than us now, huh? I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I didn't know what to say. Was I better than them? Maybe not. But I was different. I'd chosen a harder path. Walked it alone. And I wasn't about to apologize for where it led me. He left after that. No handshake. No hug. Just a bitter glance over his shoulder and the slam of a car door. A few days later, I got the final pre-hearing packet from their lawyer. They doubled down. Included a new affidavit from my parents. Full of lies. Embellishments. Proof that I'd been emotionally unstable. That I'd severed ties without cause. That I was now punishing Owen out of jealousy. I should have been angry. Should have thrown something. But I didn't. I just sat down, opened a blank document, and started typing. My final statement. The one I'd read aloud in court. And as I wrote, I didn't just think about defending myself. I thought about exposing them. Because they wanted a performance? Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. I didn't realize how heavy the past was until I started digging it up. Writing that final statement for court forced me to relive moments I'd long buried just to survive. It wasn't just paperwork or legal prep. It was therapy by fire. Each paragraph felt like a scalpel, slicing into years of numbness. And once the numbness wore off, the pain came rushing in like floodwater behind a broken dam. I wasn't okay. Not for a while. After Owen's visit, something shifted. His words clung to me like smoke. Isn't that what family does? But family never shielded me. They fed me to the wolves and called it tough love. I stopped sleeping. My appetite tanked. I'd sit at my desk staring at spreadsheets for hours, unable to focus, until I'd shut my laptop and just sit. Still, frozen, drowning in the eerie silence of a house I'd once felt proud to own. Now, it felt more like a bunker. A fortress built out of fear. One night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. Pale, unshaven, eyes rimmed red from too many nights of pretending I wasn't falling apart. I pressed my palm against the cold tile and whispered, "You're not going back there. You're not going back." But I felt like I already had. The emotional toll of the lawsuit was worse than I ever expected. Because it wasn't just a legal matter, it was my childhood on trial. And I didn't have a family standing behind me. No support system. No Sunday dinners. No concerned aunt or warm cousin or godparent offering to testify. Just me. Again, I tried calling a therapist, but their earliest available slot was 4 weeks out. I considered canceling, but something told me to hold on. Instead, I went to the park near my old college campus. Sat on the same worn bench I used to eat instant noodles on during lunch breaks, back when I had $20 in my bank account and a cracked iPhone. I looked around at the students passing by, backpacks slung over shoulders, eyes full of stress and ambition. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel envy or resentment. I felt pride. I'd done that. And more. With no safety net. No trust fund. No letters of recommendation from Dad's golf buddy. Just grit. That day marked a subtle but powerful shift. I wasn't out of the woods, not even close. But I remembered who I was. What I'd survived. What I'd built. And more importantly, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. A real one. Stamped. Handwritten. It was from Ms. Carter, my old guidance counselor. She'd included a copy of the statement she was submitting to the court, but that wasn't what got me. At the bottom, in her familiar, looping cursive, she'd written, "You were always more than they could see. Don't let them shrink your worth just because they couldn't grow theirs." I read it 4 times. Then I stuck it to my fridge with a magnet, right next to a faded photo of me at my college graduation, the one I'd attended alone, with a borrowed cap and a paper gown that didn't quite fit. That photo used to make me feel hollow. Now, it reminded me I was real. That night, I dusted off my resume. Not because I needed a new job, but because I wanted to see it. Everything I'd done. Every promotion. Every project. Every risk that paid off. I realized I had become someone remarkable, and no one in my family even knew my job title. I don't think they even knew what company I worked for. To them, I was still Henry the dropout. Henry the difficult one. Henry the selfish runaway. But that wasn't me anymore. I was Henry, senior product manager at a mid-sized tech firm. Homeowner. Debt-free. Mentor to 3 interns. Volunteer at a local adult literacy nonprofit. A man with a future he forged from scrap. And no lawsuit was going to take that from me. With renewed focus, I got to work. Quietly. Strategically. I didn't rant on social media. Didn't tell coworkers. Didn't vent in Slack channels or group chats. I rebuilt from the inside. I hired a lawyer, not flashy, but sharp. A woman named Rajani who'd spent 10 years defending clients from frivolous family claims. When I explained my case, she paused for a long time and said, "This is disgusting. But don't worry. We're not just going to defend. We're going to dismantle." She helped me refine my statement. We cross-referenced every fact in their complaint and compiled a binder of counter-evidence. Bank records from when I was 15, pay stubs, rental history, photos of me working graveyard shifts, text messages, or the lack thereof. We even tracked down my old roommate from the shelter. Turns out he'd turned his life around too. He worked maintenance at a hospital now, and was more than willing to vouch for the nights I came home after 12-hour shifts and studied under a flickering light bulb for exams that no one thought I'd pass. It felt like assembling an army of ghosts, pieces of my past rising to fight beside me. But the biggest turning point came from someone I never expected. My landlord from my first real apartment. I'd rented a tiny, roach-infested studio when I was 19. The guy barely spoke English, but he always called me hard-working boy. I reached out on a whim, asking if he remembered me. He did. And not only did he remember, I found out he'd saved a copy of the thank you note I left when I moved out. "You pay on time," he wrote in a short affidavit. "Fix toilet yourself. Quiet. Good heart." I laughed when I read it, through tears, because somehow, that mattered more than all the shiny job titles. That was who I was. A good-hearted kid who paid his rent on time and fixed his own toilet. Not the entitled brother they painted in court papers. As the hearing date crept closer, I started sleeping again. Eating again. I went back to the gym. Nothing fancy. Just stretching, lifting light, reclaiming control of my body the same way I was reclaiming my voice. People at work noticed the shift. "You seem lighter," one coworker said. I nodded. "Just cleaning house," I replied. They didn't know what I meant. But I did. The day before the hearing, I took off work and drove to the edge of town. There's a lake out there. Nothing big, just a quiet place with weeping willows and creaky docks. I used to walk there after my shifts in college, back when I didn't have air conditioning and needed somewhere cool to breathe. I stood on the dock and stared at the water, then pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. It was the letter I wrote the night I left home at 15. I'd carried it with me for 12 years. Never showed it to anyone. It was angry, messy, childish, full of scratched-out curses and broken grammar. But it was real. I read it once more, then let it fall into the water. I watched the ink bleed, the paper dissolve. It didn't fix anything, didn't change the past, but it felt like permission to stop carrying guilt that was never mine, to stop explaining myself to people who never listened, to stop waiting for an apology I was never going to get. The next morning, I woke up early, showered, shaved, and put on the Navy suit I'd worn to my first tech conference. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because it reminded me of who I'd become. I looked in the mirror, adjusted my tie, and whispered, "Let's end this." The courtroom wasn't what I expected. Smaller, quieter, no gavel, just a judge, a few rows of benches, and the quiet shuffling of paperwork. My parents sat at one table, Owen beside them, looking bored, like this was some minor inconvenience on the way to brunch. Their lawyer, a smug guy with slicked back hair, nodded at me like we were playing a friendly game of poker. I took my seat. Alone. No family behind me. No friends in the gallery. But I didn't feel alone anymore. I had my story, my truth, my proof. And when the judge called my name and asked if I had a closing statement, I stood, pulled the papers from my folder, cleared my throat, and said, "Yes, Your Honor, I do." I looked up, right at my parents, right at Owen, their faces already beginning to shift. But I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for the boy who used to sleep in borrowed hoodies and wonder if anyone would ever notice if he disappeared. I took a breath and began to speak. The courtroom fell into a hush the second I opened my mouth. It was one of those silences that doesn't happen by accident. It landed, thick, heavy, expectant. No papers rustled. No chair squeaked. Even the bailiff paused mid-shift. The judge looked at me over her glasses, pen poised just above her legal pad. She had that expression, half curious, half bored, but I could tell she'd heard enough rambling, closing statements in her life to know when something different was about to start. I didn't shout. I didn't grandstand. I didn't pace the room like some primetime legal drama. I just stood behind the little table, my hands resting lightly on the edge, and spoke clearly. "My name is Henry Marshall. I'm 27 years old. I own a home. I have a steady job, no criminal record, and zero debt. I pay my taxes, I donate to the food bank down the street, and every holiday season, I go back to the shelter I used to sleep in and drop off blankets." I glanced up. Owen shifted in his seat. My father crossed his arms. My mother didn't blink. "I say all that not to impress you," I continued, "but because I need to establish something that's apparently been lost in all this legal paperwork. I built this life. Alone. I wasn't handed it. I didn't inherit it. There was no college fund. No down payment from a generous uncle. No cosigner. No financial safety net. Everything I have, I earned. My voice didn't shake. I had practiced too many times for that. But that's not what this case is about, is it? This isn't about fairness. This isn't about family. This is about control. About a family that ignored me for a decade until they realized I had something they wanted. The judge leaned back slightly. I could feel my parents' attorney squirming, itching to object. But there was nothing objectionable yet. I reached down, pulled a page from my folder. This is a statement from Ms. Linda Carter, my high school guidance counselor. She testifies that I was effectively homeless at 15, that my parents were unresponsive when contacted about my welfare, and that I survived on free lunch vouchers and secondhand clothes from school donations. I held up another. This is from Mr. Stanley Valdez, my former landlord. He confirms I worked 3 jobs to pay rent on a 200-square-foot apartment with no heating and fixed the plumbing myself because I couldn't afford repairs. Another. This one's from George Peters, who ran the community shelter where I lived for 3 months. He remembers me coming home from work with cracked hands and study guides, falling asleep at the dining table because I had midterms the next morning. I look directly at Owen now. And this is the receipt from the day I bought my house. Paid the down payment myself. Signed the contract alone. No gifts. No loans. Just years of labor and a credit score I earned inch by inch. Now the silence in the room was different. Not tense. Electric. The judge raised her eyebrows. My lawyer didn't smile. She didn't need to. The work was being done. I could have ended the statement there. That would have been enough to win the case. But I wasn't interested in just winning. This was the setup. So I kept going. You know what's funny? I said, tone still calm. Not once. Not once. In the 12 years I've been gone, did anyone here ask how I was doing? No calls. No letters. Not even a birthday text. But the moment Owen needed a house, suddenly I'm family again. My father shifted, annoyed. My mother's mouth was a flat, hard line. I'm not angry that I wasn't helped. I added. That's life. You play the hand you're dealt. I learned that young. What I am angry about is the rewriting of history. The idea that I owe something to people who never even acknowledged my pain, let alone lifted a finger to ease it. I paused, letting the weight of that settle. Then I folded the pages, slid them back into my folder, and looked at the judge. I respectfully asked that this lawsuit be dismissed with prejudice. Not because I think I'm better than them, but because I refuse to let the people who left me behind profit from my survival. The judge looked stunned for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and said, "Thank you, Mr. Marshall." And just like that, the moment was over. But the real story, the one that matters, starts after that. Because I didn't walk out of that courtroom feeling triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt hollow, like I'd spent all this time preparing for war, only to realize I was still bleeding from battles I thought I'd buried years ago. But then something strange happened. After the hearing, as I was gathering my things, my parents didn't come up to me. They didn't say a word. But Owen? He stood by the exit, staring at the floor, hands jammed into his pockets. When I passed him, he mumbled, "You didn't have to do that." I stopped, slowly turned toward him. Didn't have to do what? Defend myself from being sued by my own brother. His jaw clenched. I just meant, you made me look like a fool. I stared at him for a long moment, then said softly, "No, Owen. You made yourself look like a fool. I just stopped covering for you." And then I left. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they'd slink off and stew in silence. But 3 days later, I got an email. Not from Owen. Not from my parents. From their lawyer. It was cold. Clinical. A single sentence stood out. "Please be advised your family intends to appeal." I stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes. Then I laughed. Not bitterly. Not hysterically. Just laughed. Because it was absurd. They were still trying to dig. Still trying to claim something that didn't belong to them. And that's when I knew. Defending myself wasn't enough. I had to end this. For good. But to do that, I needed leverage. So I made a list. Not of people I hated. Not of things I wanted to say. A list of every loose thread my family had ever left behind. The debts they forgot. The lies they whispered. The skeletons they buried because they assumed I was too far gone to dig them up. I called in favors. Dug through public records. Searched through online databases with quiet precision. And slowly, a pattern emerged. One that went far deeper than I ever realized. Turns out my parents had taken out a second mortgage years ago. One they defaulted on and quietly rolled into a consolidation loan under my mother's name. A loan that, because of a clerical error, listed me as a co-signer. I had no idea. I was 17 at the time. That alone could have been a bombshell. But it didn't stop there. Owen, his fresh start, wasn't some recent downer. He'd burned through 3 jobs in 2 years, been evicted from 2 apartments, and had multiple credit cards maxed out under his name, plus one under an authorized user profile with my dad's account. I started compiling everything. Printouts, spreadsheets, legal documents. I cross-referenced timestamps. Contacted a consumer protection attorney. Then I filed a counterclaim. But I didn't serve it yet. No, I wanted to wait. Because timing is everything. And revenge, real, satisfying revenge, isn't just about winning. It's about making sure they know exactly why they lost. So I began setting the stage. I quietly sent an anonymous tip to a local financial blog about a potential case of parental financial fraud involving a fake cosigner. Just vague enough to pique interest. Just juicy enough to keep them digging. I booked a consultation with a forensic accountant. And I reached out to Ms. Carter again. This time not for help, but for advice. You don't have to become like them to get justice, she said. But you do have to be strategic. She was right. So I made sure every move I made was legal, airtight, and documented. And when the appeal date was finally set, I smiled. Because this time, I wasn't walking into court alone. This time, I was ready to burn it all down. On my terms. The morning of the appeal, I woke up before my alarm. I don't know if it was adrenaline or peace, but I felt, still, no anxiety, no second guessing. Just a quiet certainty in my bones that today was the day it ended. Not just the lawsuit, but the grip my family had on my life. The invisible leash I'd been dragging behind me since the age of 15. I slipped into the same navy suit, straightened my cuffs, smoothed my tie. But this time, I wasn't dressing for defense. This wasn't about protecting what I had. It was about taking back everything they thought they could twist. Rajani, my lawyer, met me on the courthouse steps. She greeted me with a nod and handed over a sleek black folder. Everything's in here, she said. We've confirmed the fraud. The counterclaim is active. Judge Peters has already reviewed it in pre-hearing. And the journalist? I asked. She smirked. They'll be sitting 2 rows behind your mother. Perfect. The hearing room was the same as last time. Bland walls, worn wooden furniture. But it didn't feel small anymore. It felt like a stage. And today, the lights were pointed at them. My parents entered first, trailed by Owen. This time, there was no smug lawyer. He dropped them the moment Rajani filed the counterclaim. Apparently, he didn't sign up for financial fraud cases. The new guy was a dull-looking public defender in a wrinkled blazer who'd clearly read the case file 30 minutes before showing up. Owen didn't make eye contact with me. My father looked irritated. My mother, for the first time, looked nervous. The judge called the room to order and went straight to the appeal. Rajani stood with the grace of someone who knew she held all the cards. Your Honor, before we address the merits of the appeal, we'd like to introduce newly uncovered evidence that directly pertains to the nature of this family's financial entanglements. She passed a copy of the folder to the court clerk. The judge began flipping through it. Mr. Henry Marshall was fraudulently listed as a cosigner on a high-risk consolidation loan at the age of 17, an action facilitated by his parents without his consent or legal awareness. We have included the loan documents, expert handwriting analysis, and a notarized affidavit from a bank manager who has since confirmed the application contains forged initials. The judge stopped flipping. Forged, she repeated. Yes, Your Honor. The initials used on the document belonged to Mr. Marshall, but he did not sign them. We are submitting a counterclaim of financial fraud and identity theft under Section 530.5 of the Penal Code. We are also submitting evidence of ongoing financial abuse, including the unauthorized use of Mr. Marshall's identity for utility accounts, credit lines, and medical billing. There was an audible shift in the room. The air felt different, heavier, the kind of silence that means someone's world just started collapsing. My father turned to my mother, whispering harshly. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Owen finally looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I just looked back, calm, centered, unshaken. Because this wasn't revenge fueled by rage. It was surgical. The judge's expression hardened. I see. And have criminal charges been filed? Not yet, Rajani said smoothly. But the district attorney has been informed. We preferred to resolve this civilly, but we're fully prepared to proceed otherwise. My parents' new lawyer stood up, stammering, "Your Honor, we were unaware of these details. We respectfully request a continuance." "Denied," the judge snapped. "You filed an appeal claiming the original verdict was based on insufficient understanding of familial obligations. And now I'm learning that the so-called family in question engaged in active financial deception." She turned her full attention on my parents. "Did you or did you not list your son as a co-signer on a loan without his knowledge?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it. My father said nothing. "I'll take that as a yes." The judge slammed her gavel once. "This appeal is denied with prejudice. Mr. Marshall's counterclaim will proceed to arbitration within 30 days. Furthermore, I'm submitting a recommendation to the district attorney's office to open a formal investigation into financial misconduct. Court is adjourned." She stood and left before anyone else could speak. And just like that, it was over. But the real fallout? That came after. The story hit the blog within the week. The journalist had been kind. Names redacted, certain details blurred, but anyone who knew my family could connect the dots. The comments were brutal. People weren't just outraged. They were disgusted. "How do you sue your own kid after forging his name on a loan?" They sound like leeches. Glad the judge saw through the BS. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't need to. The court's ruling triggered a freeze on my parents' bank accounts while the arbitration process moved forward. They'd have to provide full financial disclosures, every loan, every expense, every credit pull linked to my name. And because of the fraud findings, Rajani was confident we'd win a full financial judgment. Enough to not only remove my name from those debts, but to slap them with restitution and damages. And Owen? He tried to distance himself immediately. Sent me an email 3 days after the hearing. Said he didn't know about the forged co-signing. That he never wanted things to go this far. That he was just trying to get his life together. I didn't reply, because the truth is, he did know. Maybe not the full details. Maybe not the paperwork. But he knew the kind of people our parents were. And he chose to ride that train anyway, right until it crashed into me. A month later, a mutual friend sent me a screenshot. Owen had tried to get hired at a local tech firm. Apparently, the hiring manager Googled him and found the blog article. His application was rejected. The friend included Owen's last message. "I think my brother blacklisted me." I hadn't. I didn't need to. He'd done it to himself. I never filed criminal charges, though I could have. Rajani said it was my call. But after the arbitration ruled in my favor, ordering my parents to pay $134,000 in damages, legal fees, and the full balance of the fraudulent loan, I let it end there. Because I didn't need them in prison. I needed them to live in the mess they made. I heard they had to sell their house to cover the debt. That they moved in with an uncle who only agreed because he hadn't heard the full story. Eventually, someone told him. They were asked to leave 3 months later. As for me, I left the city, bought a small cabin in the mountains. Quiet, peaceful, a little messy, but mine. I kept my job, still mentored interns, still donated blankets every winter. But I also started writing. Not revenge stories, not exposés, just the truth. What it means to grow up unseen, to build yourself from broken parts, to endure. Some of it got published, some of it didn't. But that didn't matter. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't writing to be heard by them. I was writing to hear myself. Sometimes, when I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the fog roll over the hills, I think about that courtroom. That moment when the judge said, "Did you or did you not?" That was the final fracture in their version of reality. The lie they'd built for years, shattered with 5 words and a silence they couldn't fill. And I realize that was my real victory. Not the money, not the legal win, but the silence that followed. The kind where nothing else needs to be said. Because finally, they saw me. Not as a son, not as a brother, but as a man they couldn't control. And that was the day I became free. The last thing my father ever said to me was, "We didn't think you'd fight back." And the last thing I said to him was, "That was your first mistake." My name is Cole, I'm 28 years old, and until about 6 months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood just outside of San Diego, in a house with white siding and a porch swing that squeaked when you rocked too hard. To the world, we looked like a normal, happy family. 2 parents, 2 sons, and a golden retriever named Dusty. But behind the neat curtains and smiling Christmas cards, things were always a little off. I was adopted when I was 2. My parents, Dennis and Linda, had been trying to conceive for years without success. Their miracle baby, my younger brother Ryan, came along 3 years later. And from the moment he was born, the energy in the house shifted. At first, it was subtle. Extra photos of Ryan on the fridge, more of his drawings on the walls. Then it became obvious. He got the bigger room, even though I was older. He got the new clothes, the better bike, the louder birthday parties. I was always told I was special for being adopted, but their actions said otherwise. I tried not to let it get to me. I worked hard in school, stayed out of trouble, got into a good college on scholarship. My parents didn't contribute a dime. They said they couldn't afford it, even though I knew they had just renovated their kitchen and paid for Ryan's private pitching coach. Still, I didn't resent them, not fully. I figured maybe that's just how it goes sometimes. Maybe it wasn't personal. Ryan, though, he made it personal. He never let me forget that I was the outsider, the bonus kid. At family dinners, he'd crack jokes like, "Cole's just the trial run," and my parents would chuckle instead of shutting it down. At 16, he once looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're lucky they even kept you." I remember that night vividly. I had gone upstairs and stared at the ceiling until morning, wondering if maybe I was just a guest in my own home. Fast forward a decade. I moved to Seattle after college, got a job in tech, worked my way up, and eventually started my own consulting firm. It wasn't flashy at first, but I poured everything I had into it. While Ryan was posting shirtless selfies on Instagram and failing out of community college, I was building something. I never expected help from my family, and they never offered it. We kept in touch out of obligation, holiday calls, occasional texts, but the distance between us felt like an unspoken agreement. Last year, my parents' health started to decline. My dad had a minor stroke, and my mom was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. I flew down multiple times, helped where I could, arranged appointments, and made sure their insurance covered everything. Ryan, of course, didn't lift a finger. But he was always there for the photo ops, smiling bedside pictures, captions like, "Cherish every moment." I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself it wasn't about recognition. Then came the will. It was a sunny day in March when I got the email from the estate attorney, asking me to be present for the reading. I took the next flight down. We gathered in the office of a man named Mr. Wilcox, a tired-looking lawyer with a balding head and coffee stains on his collar. Ryan walked in late, wearing sunglasses indoors and reeking of whatever cologne influencers bathe in these days. My parents weren't there. They had passed 3 weeks apart, my mom first, then my dad shortly after. It still hadn't fully sunk in. Mr. Wilcox opened the folder, cleared his throat, and began reading. "To our son Ryan," he said, "we leave the house, the vehicles, and the remainder of our savings, totaling $740,000. I sat still, waiting. "To Cole," Mr. Wilcox continued, "we leave our best wishes." That was it. No keepsake. No letter. Not even a photo album. Ryan grinned like he'd won the lottery. "Guess they finally admitted who the real son is," he said, with zero shame. "Face it, man, you were never really family." I didn't respond. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. I stood up, thanked Mr. Wilcox for his time, and walked out without another word. Outside, I sat in my rental car and just stared ahead. I don't know how long I stayed there. My hands were shaking, not from rage, but from something deeper. Something cold. Like a final lock clicking shut on a door I'd been trying to open my whole life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove to the airport and flew home. 3 days later, I got a call from a woman named Diane. She said she was with Worthington and Blaze, a law firm in Manhattan, and that she had urgent news regarding an estate. I assumed it was some kind of mistake, but she asked for me by full name, including the middle name only my birth certificate listed, one I never used. That night, I sat on my couch, barely breathing, as Diane explained that my biological parents, George and Ava Lennox, had passed away in a private plane crash 2 weeks earlier. I didn't know them. I'd never met them. But apparently, they'd been keeping quiet tabs on me all these years. They were wealthy, reclusive entrepreneurs who had built and sold multiple companies in pharmaceuticals and clean tech. They had no other children, no living relatives. They left everything to me. The estate included several properties, one in Napa Valley, another in the Hamptons, and a brownstone in New York. A trust fund, stocks, patents, royalties. The total value? North of $42 million. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at my blank TV screen as the numbers echoed in my ears. I thought I'd feel shock, or disbelief, or joy, but instead, I felt something heavier. Vindication. And sadness. So much sadness. For the parents I never knew, for the ones I thought I had, and for the little boy who'd once prayed they'd love him like they did their real son. I flew to New York the next week. The estate manager showed me everything. The brownstone, the records, even a lockbox with handwritten letters. They'd written to me every year on my birthday, but never sent them. I spent 3 days reading them, crying quietly in a room filled with people I never got to know. They had wanted me. They had loved me. From afar, silently, but fiercely. And now they were gone too. I kept it all quiet. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't tell anyone from my former life. I moved into the brownstone, set up a foundation in their name, and spent my days planning what to do with a future I never imagined I'd have. That is, until Ryan showed up at my doorstep, looking desperate, muttering something about bad investments and needing a place to stay. I opened the gate, stepped out just far enough for him to see me, and said the first words I'd spoken to him in over a year. He blinked when he saw me. "Cole?" he asked, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. I didn't say anything at first, just looked at him. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. The kind of weight loss that comes from stress and too many sleepless nights. His once perfect haircut had grown shaggy, and his clothes, designer, sure, were wrinkled and a little too worn around the cuffs. He looked like a man trying to wear the last pieces of a life that didn't fit him anymore. "Man," he said, forcing a laugh, "I didn't even know you lived here. I saw the place online when I was looking for rentals and thought, no way this is Cole's." But then the gate opened and he trailed off, glancing around at the pristine front garden, the black wrought iron fencing, the polished brass plate with the Lennox name. I stayed quiet, letting him talk himself into knots. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I didn't come to fight," he said finally. Things haven't been great lately. I made some investments that didn't pan out. Got burned on a crypto deal. And the house, Mom and Dad's place, I had to sell it. The market tanked, and I'm underwater on some debts. I thought maybe we could talk." I crossed my arms. "Talk about what exactly?" He hesitated. "Look, I know things got weird after the will. I was just caught off guard, man. I didn't mean all that stuff I said." "You didn't mean it?" I repeated, not raising my voice, not even moving. "You've been saying things like that since we were kids, Ryan. The only difference is now you're broke, and you think I forgot." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I cut in. "Is growing up in a house where your parents let you believe you were better because of DNA. What's not fair is giving everything to a son who did nothing but take, and leaving nothing for the one who actually showed up when it counted." He looked down, jaw clenched. "So this is revenge, then? You're gonna leave your brother out in the cold?" I smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in it. "You're not my brother. You made that real clear." Ryan stepped forward. Okay, look, I messed up. I know that. But you've got money now. You can help. I'm not asking for a handout, just a place to stay. Just until I get back on my feet." That's when it hit me. He didn't know? Not really. He didn't know the full picture. I don't know if he thought I won the lottery or sold a startup or something, but he had no idea where the money came from or what it represented. So I asked, "Do you know who lived here before me?" He shook his head. "My biological parents," I said slowly. "This was their home. They passed away in a crash a few weeks after Mom and Dad passed. Turns out they'd been watching from a distance my whole life. And they left everything to me. Millions. Properties. Stocks. A foundation. You know what else they left? Letters. Dozens of them. They wrote to me every year. They loved me from afar, even if they never got the chance to say it in person." Ryan stared at me like he was trying to do the math, trying to process what I just told him. "You're saying they were rich?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that I finally found out what it's like to be wanted, to be chosen, not out of convenience, not out of pressure, but out of love." He didn't say anything. He just stood there, mouth half open, like someone had unplugged the batteries mid-sentence. And then, with all the grace of a drowning man, he tried again. "I'm sorry, Cole. Seriously, I was a jerk growing up. I was jealous, I guess. You always seemed so together. You didn't need anyone. And I don't know. I guess I thought if I pushed you out, I'd feel more like the favorite." "You were the favorite," I said simply. "But I don't think it made you happy, did it?" He looked away. I could have ended it there. shut the gate, turned around, and walked back into the warmth of the life I was finally building for myself. But something in me paused. Not out of sympathy, not even pity, just closure. "Wait here," I said. I walked back inside, down the hallway lined with framed sketches my birth mother had drawn, landscapes, wildflowers, silhouettes of me as a toddler she must have imagined from memory. I opened a drawer in the study and pulled out a single envelope. Inside was a photocopy of the original Lennox will and a letter from their attorney verifying the transfer of assets. I brought it back and handed it through the gate. Ryan opened it with shaky fingers, eyes scanning the document. And when he reached the bottom, his face went pale. "This isn't real," he whispered. "It's very real." He clutched the paper, then looked up at me, suddenly furious. "So what? You're just going to stand there on your throne and watch me drown?" I didn't flinch. "I watched you swim while I sank for most of my life. I think you'll manage." His lips curled, but he didn't say anything else. Just stood there for a long moment, then slowly turned and walked away, the papers fluttering slightly in the wind. I watched until he reached the sidewalk, until the streets swallowed him up. And just when I turned to go back inside, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. One I didn't recognize, New Mexico area code. The voice on the other end was calm, careful, and what they said next changed everything. The voice on the line was female, soft-spoken but steady. "Is this Cole Lennox?" My throat tightened. "Yes." "Who is this?" There was a pause. "My name is Elena. I was your biological mother's attorney. Ava Lennox. I'm calling you because something came up. Something not included in the original estate package." I closed the door behind me slowly, the sound of it shutting echoing through the entry hall like the thud of a gavel. I thought I already had everything. The properties, the accounts, the letters. Yes, those were all part of the formal estate, Elena said. But there were safeguards. Ava and George were very particular about privacy and legacy. There were things they didn't even want disclosed in their wills. But per Ava's instructions, I was to contact you if, and only if, you were approached by your adoptive family after the inheritance was transferred. I blinked, confused. "You mean, they knew this would happen?" I wouldn't say they knew, but they expected it. Ava had an instinct about people. She figured that once the dust settled and certain people realized you were no longer the wallet with a pulse, as she put it, they'd come crawling. I almost laughed, but it got caught somewhere in my chest. "So what exactly am I being contacted for?" "She left you something else," Elena said. "Something private, not to be handled by the estate firm. She didn't want it in legal hands or on any paper trail. I have it in a lockbox in my personal office in Santa Fe." "What is it?" "I think you should come see for yourself," she said. "I can have it ready by tomorrow. There's also someone you need to meet." Ava's wishes were very specific about that, too. I sat down slowly on the leather couch, heart thudding in a strange rhythm. "Who am I meeting?" Another pause. This one longer. "Elena," I prompted. She sighed. "Her name is Maria, and she's your sister." I froze. The room went still. "No," I said. "No, that's not possible. I was told I was their only child." "That's what the will said," she replied gently. "Because legally, you were." Maria's existence was complicated. Ava gave birth to her when she was just 19, before she ever met George. It was a closed adoption. She spent years trying to track her down and didn't find her until shortly before you turned 25. By then, Maria was married, had children of her own, and didn't want her life disrupted. "And now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Now things have changed." Maria reached out just days after Ava passed. She wanted to talk. "She's ready." I stood up without realizing it, pacing in front of the massive bay windows that looked out over the Lennox courtyard. "So what? You're telling me I have a sister I've never met, who's just now coming out of the woodwork, right after I inherit millions?" "I understand how that sounds," Elena said. "But Maria doesn't want money. In fact, she made it very clear she doesn't care about the inheritance. She just wants to talk. And Ava wanted the two of you to meet. She wrote that if anything were to happen to her, you should be given a letter, one that explains everything." I let the silence linger for a beat before I said, "Text me your address. I'll be on a flight by morning." The next day felt surreal. I barely slept, replaying every word from that call in my head. A sister, a whole other branch of my life, tucked away in the shadows like an unopened chapter. I had always assumed my biological parents were childless before me, that their decision to give me up was a one-time heartbreak. But now I had to confront something stranger. I wasn't alone in the way I thought I was. When I arrived at the law office in Santa Fe, a sandstone building nestled in the hills outside the city, Elena was already waiting in the front lobby. She was in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a quiet, perceptive demeanor. She didn't waste time with small talk. "She's in the back," Elena said. "But before you see her, Ava asked that I give you this." She handed me a thick envelope, yellowed with time and sealed with red wax. My name was written in Ava's handwriting, careful, even, and unmistakably maternal. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. The letter was long, 7 pages, handwritten. Ava told me about her life before George, about Maria's birth, about how young and scared she was when she made the decision to give her up. She described the pain, the regret, and the years she spent searching. She spoke about how finding me later in life had been a miracle, one she never thought she deserved. She explained why she never tried to reach out directly. "I didn't want to disrupt the life you were building, but we watched from a distance. Every birthday, every graduation. We were proud of you." I had to stop reading twice just to breathe. My eyes were burning, and I couldn't stop the quiet shaking in my hands. She ended the letter with a simple request. "Meet your sister. Not because I ask it, but because you deserve to know you were never alone." Not really. And neither was she. I wiped my face, folded the letter carefully, and nodded to Elena. "I'm ready." She led me down the hallway to a private conference room. The door opened slowly, and inside stood a woman maybe 6 years older than me. Her dark hair was pinned up, her eyes tired but warm. She looked up when I walked in, and we just stared at each other for a moment. No one moved. Then she gave me a sad smile and said, "So, you're Cole." I nodded. "And you're Maria?" She looked like she wanted to say something else, but just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowned, and turned it face down without answering. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's been a weird week. I almost didn't come, but I wanted to meet you. I needed to meet you." I sat down across from her. "Did you know about me?" "Not until about a year ago," she said. "Ava sent a letter. Said she didn't expect anything, just that she wanted me to know she had another child." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready. Then after the plane crash, I guess I realized time's not something you can buy more of. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all still sinking in. "So where does that leave us?" Maria looked me dead in the eye. "That's what I want to figure out. But there's something else. Something you should probably know before we go any further." I leaned in, heart starting to pick up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph, faded, old, with worn corners. She slid it across the table. And when I saw who was standing in the background of that photo, behind Ava, behind Maria, I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Because I recognized him. I stared at the photograph, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. It was grainy, clearly taken decades ago, but the face in the background was unmistakable. Cropped near the edge, arms crossed and partially turned away, was Dennis, the man I'd called Dad my entire life. The same Dennis who used to tuck me in when I was little. The same man who once taught me to tie my shoelaces, who took me on bike rides, who later signed a will leaving me nothing. Maria saw the recognition in my face before I said a word. "So," she said, her voice low. "You see it too." I looked up slowly. "Why was he there?" Maria sighed, folded her hands, and leaned forward. "That photo was taken in Albuquerque, 1994, about a year before you were adopted. Ava didn't know it was taken. Someone else in her circle snapped it at a dinner party. When she found it years later, she almost threw it away. She thought she was seeing things. But it was him, Dennis. She never figured out why he was there or how he was connected to anyone in that room." I ran my hand through my hair, trying to process what that meant. "Are you saying my adoptive father knew Ava?" "We don't know how well," Maria said, "but yeah, that's what Ava suspected. After she found the photo, she went digging. She found out Dennis used to work for a pharmaceutical company in New Mexico in the early 90s, the same company Ava consulted for before she built her own firm. Their paths crossed more than once." "Wait," I said, sitting up straighter. "Are you saying the adoption wasn't random? That he knew who I was?" Maria hesitated. "That's exactly what I'm saying. Ava was convinced it wasn't a coincidence. But by the time she realized it, it was too late. You were already with Dennis and Linda. She tried to reach out, but they cut off all communication. It's why she and George moved their operations east and disappeared from public view. She didn't want to risk your life being upended. My pulse thudded in my ears. All my life, I thought Dennis and Linda had just happened upon me, that I'd been placed into their arms by chance or providence. But now, this changed everything. It meant Dennis had chosen me, but not out of kindness. Out of control. Why wouldn't they just tell me? I asked, voice cracking a little. Why would they go through all that and then treat me like an outsider? Maria's face softened. Ava wondered the same thing. But you said they never treated you like you were really theirs, right? Yeah, I said bitterly. They reminded me of that every day. Maybe that's the thing, she said. Maybe Dennis wanted to keep you, not because he loved you, but because he wanted to hurt Ava. I stared at her. You're saying I was a pawn. She nodded slowly. Or leverage. Or revenge. Ava never figured it out completely, but she carried the guilt for years. That she lost you to them. I didn't know what to say. I felt like my brain was trying to rewrite my whole life, page by page, as I sat there. Maria reached over, placed a hand on mine. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I just think you deserve the truth. Ava didn't want to leave this world with secrets. And I think she hoped we'd find each other, even if it was late. I squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. A piece clicking into place. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. I needed to hear it, even if it hurts. We talked for hours after that. She showed me more letters Ava had sent her, shared photos, told me about her kids, her life, her regrets. And I told her mine. The broken holidays, the fake smiles, the loneliness. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to someone. She just got it. Eventually, she asked the question I didn't expect. So what are you going to do about Ryan? I exhaled slowly. Honestly, I don't know. He came crawling the second he lost everything. And the way he looked at me, like I was just a safety net. Like I owed him. You don't, she said. You owe you. Whatever gives you peace. That's the only thing that matters. A week later, I flew back to New York. I'd left Ryan's call unanswered while I was gone, and I came back to 5 more voicemails and a text that simply said, Please, Cole. I'm losing everything. When I pulled into the driveway of the brownstone, I saw him waiting on the front steps, duffel bag beside him, hoodie pulled up, looking like a kicked dog. He stood when he saw me. Cole, thank God, man. I didn't know if you were even coming back. I parked, got out, and stood in front of him. This isn't your home, Ryan. I know, he said quickly, hands raised. I'm not here to stay. Look, I'm sorry, okay? For everything. For the things I said at the will. For the stuff I did growing up. I was a kid, man. I didn't know what I was doing. You were still saying that stuff 2 years ago. I know. He looked down. I was jealous. You had your life together. You didn't need them the way I did. I raised an eyebrow. You mean, you needed their money? He didn't respond. Just stared at the ground. I know about Dennis, I said. He looked up sharply. I know he knew Ava. I know I wasn't adopted by accident. He took me to get back at her. And he never loved me. Not really. And Linda just followed his lead. But you? You made a choice every single day to make sure I knew I didn't belong. His jaw clenched. I didn't know about any of that. That's the point, I said. You didn't want to know. You just wanted to win. Silence stretched between us. Then he said, So what now? You slammed the door in my face? Let me fall. I looked at him, at the man who had once been my brother in name, if not in spirit. And I made my decision. No, I said. I'm going to give you one chance. His eyes lit up. I'm setting up a charitable foundation under Ava and George's name. It's going to support underprivileged kids and young adults who were displaced, like I was. I'm hiring people who understand hardship, who know how to build something from nothing. And I'm willing to give you a job, entry level, starting from scratch. You'll get a salary, but nothing fancy. You'll report to someone else. And if you mess up, you're out. No safety net. No more bailouts. You take this seriously, or you walk. He blinked at me. You're serious. Dead serious. He looked away, shoulders slumped. What if I'm not cut out for it? Then you figure it out, I said. Like I did. Like everyone has to. Or you walk away, and I don't hear from you again. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. It's been 8 months since then. Ryan took the job. He's been quiet, reserved, but he shows up. He's learning. Slowly. And I'm watching, not as his savior, not as his brother, but as someone who knows what it's like to rise from nothing. Maria and I talk every week. I've visited her family twice. Her kids call me Uncle Cole, and for the first time in my life, that title feels like it means something. The brownstone is still home, but it's not a castle built from revenge anymore. It's a place of memory, of healing, of legacy. Sometimes, late at night, I read Ava's letters again. There's one line I always come back to. You were never a mistake. You were our second chance. And maybe now, finally, I get to be someone else's. Maybe that's what family is supposed to be. Not blood, not paper, but choice. And this time, I'm choosing peace. I'm James, I'm 34, and for the past 5 years, I've been the unofficial event planner for my extended family. It started small, coordinating birthdays, making group chats, setting up digital invites, but over time, it became expected of me. Not requested, not appreciated. Expected. The kicker? I never complained. I liked creating memories, especially since most of my family seemed content recycling the same tired gatherings, paper plates, store-bought cookies, folding chairs, and passive-aggressive conversation. This year, Easter was mine to plan, and I wanted it to be perfect. Not just pretty good or, well, at least the ham was warm. I mean magazine spread perfect. I rented a small garden venue just outside the city, where cherry blossoms were still hanging on in delicate clusters, and the weather forecast promised crisp air and sunshine. I booked a professional photographer who specialized in candid family events. There was a petting zoo corner with baby goats and chicks. I even brought in a local caterer known for their farm-to-table brunch menus. And yes, I rented a full-sized bounce house, not because any kid asked for it, but because I knew what it was like growing up in this family, with everything always just good enough. I wanted the kids to have joy that wasn't rationed. It took months of planning and nearly $6,000 out of my own pocket, none of which I asked anyone to help pay for. The only thing I did ask for was that everyone RSVP on time so I could coordinate with the caterer. Most people didn't. I had to text them one by one to confirm. When they showed up, not a single person thanked me, not really. Some said things like, "Oh wow, this is fancy," or "Did you win the lottery?" My Aunt Lydia said, "I hope this isn't your way of trying to distract from that whole job situation." Because yes, I recently switched careers, and apparently that meant I needed to be monitored. It didn't really hit me until the food was being laid out. The tables were set with ceramic plates and cloth napkins, not disposable stuff. The buffet was a spread of quiches, roasted vegetables, fruit salads carved into blooming flowers. I'd chosen the music playlist myself, upbeat classics, nothing too loud. The photographer floated quietly among us, catching smiles and messy toddler hands grabbing carrot cake. For a moment, it felt like everything had gone right. I sat down at the head of one table, finally ready to eat something and maybe, just maybe, soak in a bit of pride. That's when it happened. My Aunt Lydia, whose biggest contribution to any family event is usually a stale bag of store-brand chips, sat across from me with her arms crossed, not touching her food. She looked me square in the face, then scoffed like I'd just burped the national anthem. "You're just doing all this for attention, aren't you?" Her voice was sharp but casual, like she'd said something no one could possibly disagree with. Across the table, my cousin Claire snorted. "I mean, it is giving main character energy," she said, giggling behind her mimosa. Her phone was out, snapping selfies with the peacocks wandering in the background like we were at a royal tea party. My mom? She was sitting just a few seats away. She looked down at her plate and kept eating. She didn't even flinch. Now, I've swallowed a lot in this family. Growing up, I was the quiet kid who got called sensitive every time I cried, dramatic if I ever tried to explain how I felt. I was the one who got left off the Christmas ornament rotation because I was too old at 12. The one who gave speeches at birthdays and got told afterward I talked too much. So yeah, I was used to brushing things off. But in that moment, sitting in the sunshine, surrounded by decorations I'd hand-placed and food I'd paid for, watching the people I'd done all this for not only ignore my effort but mock it outright, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not sadness. Not even anger. Just clarity. I looked at my aunt, then at my cousin, then slowly at my mom. No one met my eyes. I stood up, calmly, quietly, walked a few steps away and pulled out my phone. I called the caterer. "Hey, it's James," I said. "Yeah, we're going to wrap things up early. Can you start packing everything up now? We'll cancel the dessert table and the drinks refill." "No, it's fine. Just send the final invoice tonight." As I turned around, I caught a glimpse of Claire lowering her phone. My aunt was frozen mid-bite. My mom had finally looked up. I didn't say a word to them. Not yet. I just walked over to the photographer and said, "Thanks again." I think we're going to end a little early. If you could wrap up in the next 15 minutes, that'd be great. The bounce house deflated slowly in the background, like a sigh. Plates clinked and silverware went quiet. Someone finally asked, "Wait, are we leaving?" I just smiled tightly and went to the side to help the staff start folding chairs. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a single thing. But the silence that spread after that call? It was louder than any speech I could have made. And just as the first wave of awkward shifting began, just as people started whispering and glancing at each other, someone called out, "James, what's going on?" I turned slowly toward the voice. It was my cousin Mark, one of the few I actually liked growing up. He had that half-confused, half-guilty look, like someone who had just realized he might be sitting on the wrong side of a family divide. His daughter was still bouncing inside the half-deflated castle, giggling, unaware that the air was literally being pulled out of her day. His wife stood beside him, awkwardly clutching her purse like she'd walked into a conversation she wasn't invited to. "What's going on?" he repeated. I took a breath. I didn't want to blow up. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about theatrics. It was about clarity and boundaries. And finally making them see. "I'm done," I said plainly. A few heads turned. My voice wasn't raised, but somehow it cut through the warm air and landed with more weight than if I'd screamed. I paid for this brunch. I rented this space. I organized everything, every flower, every menu option, every seat chart, every activity for the kids. And I did it because I thought, for once, it might be nice to have a family gathering that didn't feel like an obligation. People were listening now. Forks were down. Phones were pocketed. Even the DJ had subtly lowered the volume. But instead, I get told it's for attention, that I'm being performative, that I'm, desperate for validation. I glanced at Aunt Lydia. She looked away, suddenly fascinated by her untouched asparagus. "Claire makes jokes. My own mother doesn't even flinch, and not one person here bothered to say thank you. Not once." Claire opened her mouth, probably to deliver some faux apology soaked in sarcasm, but I cut her off. "No, don't make it a joke. Don't shrug and say, 'You know how we are.' Because I know how we are, and I'm saying I'm not doing it anymore. If you think this is about attention, fine. Maybe it is. Because for once, I wanted to feel like I mattered to this family beyond being the guy who foots the bill and gets laughed at behind his back." Silence again. The kind that crackles in your ears. The kind that makes even birds stop chirping. I turned to the caterer, who was already boxing up the mini quiches. "You guys are good to start clearing. Whatever leftovers are left, donate them to the shelter on Lincoln. I've already made arrangements." That part was true. I'd included a clause in the contract just in case we had too much food. I never expected to use it because I'd planned for leftovers to be part of the take-home favor bags. But now it felt perfect. "What about the kids?" Claire finally said, standing and brushing off her designer dress like she'd suddenly remembered how to be a human being. I raised an eyebrow. "They're welcome to go home and enjoy your hospitality. I assume you brought something other than criticism." She scowled. "God, you're so dramatic. And you're so predictable," I replied calmly. "You could have said thank you. You could have said nothing. But you chose to tear someone down for trying to do something good. That's not on me anymore. That's on you." Aunt Lydia had the audacity to look offended. "Well, I never." "No, you always," I said, turning to her. "You always belittle. You always minimize. And you always hide behind that smirk like it's some kind of shield against accountability. But this isn't your potluck and paper plate world anymore. If you don't like how I do things, you're not invited next time." In fact, I scanned the group, my voice steady. There won't be a next time. Not like this. I'm done planning family events. I'm done being the doormat you all wipe your feet on while pretending it's affection. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Then I turned to my mom. She hadn't said a word through all of this. She just stared at her plate, fork resting between her fingers. "Do you have anything to say?" I asked. She looked up, finally. Her eyes met mine, but there was no emotion in them. Not sadness. Not regret. Just tiredness. "You always make things so dramatic, James," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. "No, Mom. I just stopped pretending." She didn't reply. A few minutes later, chairs were being folded, the bounce house was deflated and hauled away, and families were trickling out in awkward pairs, muttering half-hearted goodbyes like they'd just attended a failed business seminar. Only Mark stayed behind. He approached me while I helped the photographer load equipment into their car. "Hey, listen," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know that sucked. And I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. I nodded, appreciating that at least someone had the decency to say it. I should have said something earlier, he added. I didn't know it would get like that. I did, I said simply. He sighed. Well, if you ever throw something again, I'll show up early and stay late. Promise. I smiled, but it was sad. There's not going to be a next time. At least not for them. Mark looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just offered a handshake, then pulled me into a quick, one-armed hug. You did good, man. It was beautiful. Thanks. By the time I got in my car, the venue was nearly cleared out. The sun was still out, the breeze still gentle. If someone had driven by, they wouldn't know that anything dramatic had happened here. But for me, it was the first time I'd said what I needed to say. And that kind of peace? It was better than any applause. I thought that would be the end of it. But what happened next proved just how far some people are willing to go, especially when their free ride gets canceled. It started the next morning. I woke up around 9, later than usual, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had a checklist chasing me out of bed. No group chat to monitor, no vendors to confirm, no rental trucks to track down. Just peace. And coffee. But peace is a fragile thing when your family sees your boundaries as betrayal. My phone buzzed nonstop before I even reached the kitchen. 23 texts. 4 missed calls. 2 voicemails. The first message was from my mom. James. Call me. Now. Then Lydia. Really mature move yesterday. You made a scene and embarrassed all of us. Then Claire. You're actually insane. Who cancels a holiday mid-brunch? Grow up. Then my mom again. We need to talk about what you said. And what you did. People are upset. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured my coffee, opened my laptop, and scrolled through the photographer's early preview gallery. He'd already sent a few raw shots. Candid moments I had hoped to print and frame. Mark's daughter mid-laugh. The kids chasing bubbles. My table settings catching the sunlight. For a brief second, I felt a sting of loss. This could have been a memory we all cherished. But they ruined it. Not me. By noon, things had escalated. I got a notification from Facebook. You've been removed as the admin of family events and holidays. That was the private group I had created years ago, initially to coordinate birthdays and anniversaries. Over time, it had grown into the central hub for everything from potlucks to Secret Santa pairings. I ran it. I curated it. And just like that, they locked me out. Then came the kicker, a new post, visible even without admin access, written by my mother. Yesterday's brunch was meant to be a celebration. Unfortunately, James decided to turn it into a dramatic spectacle. We all know he's been going through a tough time with work, and maybe that stress got the better of him. Let's try to have some compassion and move forward. The rest of us will be hosting a do-over Easter lunch next Sunday. No drama. Just family. No mention of the money I spent. No apology for the disrespect. Just subtle character assassination disguised as concern. I stared at the screen in disbelief. A do-over? Like they could erase the whole thing, sweep it under the rug, and carry on without ever acknowledging what happened? That was the moment the sadness turned into something else, something colder. Sharper. They wanted to pretend I was unstable. That my boundaries were tantrums. That my reaction was overblown. And now they were planning a replacement event to rewrite the narrative, complete with potluck-style sign-ups and probably Aunt Lydia's stale potato salad. But here's the thing about letting people take advantage of you for too long. When you finally stop, they don't just get mad. They panic. They lash out. Because now they have to actually contribute. Now they have to organize. And for the first time in years, they didn't have me to fix everything when things inevitably fell apart. I could have let them flail. I could have walked away and left it at that. But I knew my family too well. And I wasn't about to let them rewrite history while throwing me under the bus. So I took a breath, opened my old hard drive, and I began pulling files, receipts, invoices, spreadsheets, group texts, email confirmations, everything I had saved from the last 5 years of playing host, planner, and unpaid event coordinator. Every brunch, every birthday, every holiday, every dollar. I wasn't doing this for revenge, not yet. I was doing it to build something. A timeline, a pattern, a story. And once I had it, that's when the real payback began. I spent the better part of that afternoon digging through 5 years of digital receipts and files. It was like flipping through a museum of all the times I'd bent over backwards while my family barely noticed, or worse, mocked me for it. There was the Thanksgiving in 2019 where I rented banquet tables and custom linens after my mom's folding chairs nearly collapsed the year before. The catering invoice for $1,200, the personalized name cards I'd stayed up making, and the group chat message from my mom that read, "Don't overdo it again this year, James." It's not the Met Gala. I'd laughed it off then, but seeing it now, it landed differently. Or Claire's baby shower. That one hit harder than I expected. I'd coordinated with her husband to surprise her, built a custom photo wall out of PVC pipe and silk flowers, and paid out of pocket for a dessert table shaped like a carousel. Claire cried when she saw it, told everyone I was the sweetest cousin ever. And then, 2 weeks later, she posted on Instagram that her mom had done everything. Never mentioned me once. I had screenshots. I had receipts. I had hundreds of examples. And I was tired of being quiet about them. So I made a website. It started as a joke in my head, some dramatic family fraud files kind of thing. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If they wanted to control the narrative, I was going to publish my version, except mine had timestamps. The domain was simple, private, and unlisted. I wasn't trying to go viral. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone publicly. This was personal. Page 1. 5 years of being taken for granted. I wrote a quiet, matter-of-fact intro. No melodrama. Just, this is a record of my contributions to family events since 2018. I created this because it seems there's confusion about who has done what. I won't be addressing this further in group chats or social media. The facts are below. Each section was organized by year. Underneath every event, I posted photos, some from our shared albums, some they'd forgotten I'd taken, and attached copies of every invoice. I blurred sensitive info, left out names of children, and made sure not to post anything embarrassing. This wasn't meant to be cruel, just undeniable. At the bottom, I added a final note. I will no longer be funding, organizing, or hosting any future events. Please direct your questions to whoever's planning the do-over Easter. Best of luck. Then I sent the link. Not in the group chat. Not on Facebook. I emailed it to each of them individually. No subject line. Just the link and a single sentence. Since everyone's rewriting history, here's my version, with footnotes. It took about 12 minutes for the first call to come in. Aunt Lydia. I let it ring. Then Claire. Then my mom. Then my mom again. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I watched the website analytics slowly tick up. 3 views. Then 5. Then 11. The average time spent on the page? 16 minutes. Then the emails started rolling in. From Mark, wow. I had no idea it was that much. That's insane. I'm really sorry, James. From my Uncle Greg. You never said anything. I figured you enjoyed doing it. From my mom. I think we should talk. Privately. I waited a day before responding. Then I sent a single message back to my mom. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm also not available. Hope Easter 2.0 goes well. That Sunday, they held their do-over. They tried to keep it quiet, but Mark sent me a photo. A backyard setup, folding tables, mismatched chairs, buffet trays with aluminum foil, and Aunt Lydia carrying a box of Costco cupcakes like she was delivering a wedding cake. No bounce house. No photographer. No themed playlist. Just the way it used to be. The way they were used to. Claire posted a blurry group photo with the caption, "Family is everything." But for the first time, I wasn't in it. I didn't have to smile through clenched teeth or pretend it didn't sting. I spent the afternoon at a botanical garden, eating overpriced gelato and watching strangers laugh together. Strangers who didn't expect anything from me, who didn't twist love into obligation. A week later, I got a card in the mail. Handwritten. From my mom. She wrote, "I didn't realize how much you did. I'm sorry I didn't say thank you when it mattered. I understand why you walked away. I hope one day we can find our way back." I didn't reply to my mom's card. Not right away. I reread it a few times. Let the words settle in my chest like warm tea, unsure if they were comfort or just the echo of something too late. She had written, "I hope one day we can find our way back." And while a part of me wanted to believe that, a bigger part of me knew how many holidays, birthdays, and quiet Saturdays I'd spent trying to build that road alone, brick by brick, while they barely noticed it was even there. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange part. It's easy to assume that moments like this end with fireworks or slammed doors or epic clapbacks. But the truth is, real endings, grown-up ones, they're quiet. They happen in the space where pain used to live, once you've cleared it out and replaced it with peace. And I was peaceful. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need the applause or the recognition or even the apology, not really. What I needed, what I chose, was distance. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, then act surprised when they never learn to build their own fire. That spring, I booked a trip, a solo getaway to Lisbon. I'd always wanted to go, but never felt like I had the time. There was always something to plan, someone to show up for, a list that never ended. This time, the list was mine. I wandered old neighborhoods with pastel buildings and hung laundry lines. I ate custard tarts on sunny balconies, listened to live fado music echo through cobblestone alleys, and struck up conversations with strangers who didn't ask what I could do for them, just who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't shrink myself to fit a family mold that never quite included me. Back home, the family events and holidays group chat went quiet. No more overeager sign-up sheets, no vague comments about who's pulling their weight, no passive-aggressive emoji reactions. Just silence. And silence, I've learned, can be a gift. Mark and I kept in touch. He sent me pictures now and then, his daughter's school recital, his wife's homemade pasta disasters, even a selfie at a birthday party he organized himself. Used your checklist, he texted once. Total chaos. Loved it. That meant more than he knew. Months later, around Thanksgiving, my mom called again. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her voice was soft, hesitant. She didn't ask me to come. She didn't try to guilt me. She just said, "We miss you. I miss you. And I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I hope you're happy." And I was. That year, I didn't spend Thanksgiving under fluorescent lights or reheating casseroles in someone else's kitchen. I stayed home, cooked what I liked, set one plate, played jazz, lit a candle that smelled like cinnamon and old bookstores. And I raised my glass, not to family, but to freedom. Because sometimes, walking away isn't a break. It's a beginning. And this was mine. I was 26 when I realized family first didn't always mean love. It could also mean convenience. My name's Thomas, and if you asked anyone who knows my parents, they'd say we're the kind of family that sticks together. That's what Mom always said at every barbecue, every Christmas dinner, every time she needed to remind everyone how close we supposedly were. But behind those smiling photos and matching sweaters was a hierarchy, a silent one, but very real. My older brother, Eric, was the golden child. And I was the spare room. Growing up, Eric could do no wrong. When he failed a class, it was because the teacher didn't like him. When I got an A, it was, "Good, now help your brother study." When he borrowed Dad's car and got into a fender bender, they replaced it within a week. When I asked to borrow the same car to drive to a job interview, I was told I hadn't earned that kind of trust yet. I wish I could say it didn't bother me, that I brushed it off, but it stung more than I'd ever admit out loud. I worked 2 part-time jobs through college just to stay independent, while Eric bounced between startups and half-hearted business ideas that my parents always invested in. When I finally got a steady job in tech and moved out, I thought I'd escaped the invisible weight of being second place. I rented a small but cozy place about 20 minutes from my parents' house. Still close enough to visit, still far enough to breathe. I'd stop by every few weeks, bring Mom her favorite pastries, maybe fix something around the house that Dad hadn't gotten to. I wasn't doing it for approval anymore. It was just habit. Maybe part of me still hoped they'd notice the effort. But everything started shifting after Eric got married. His wife, Vanessa, had the kind of charm that could win over anyone in 5 minutes. Mom adored her instantly, said she was the daughter she never had. Dad was just happy to have someone who laughed at his bad jokes. I didn't mind her at first. She seemed polite enough. But there was something calculated behind her smile, like she was always keeping score. One night, about a year after their wedding, Mom invited me over for dinner. "Just family," she said over the phone. "It'll be nice to have everyone together again." I remember she sounded almost too chipper, but I didn't think much of it. Dinner was tense. Not openly hostile, just full of little undercurrents you only notice if you've grown up around them. Vanessa talked nonstop about how expensive their new apartment was, how tiny it felt compared to the homes in the suburbs. Mom nodded sympathetically, refilling her wine glass every few minutes. Dad just smiled, asking about Eric's business plans like he hadn't heard this same vague pitch for the 4th time. I mostly kept quiet, eating my roast beef and trying not to roll my eyes every time Vanessa dropped another humble brag about how hard it was living in the city. Then, halfway through dessert, Mom cleared her throat. "Thomas, we wanted to talk to you about something," she said, her tone suddenly more formal. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Sure," I said slowly. She glanced at Dad, who nodded. "Your brother and Vanessa are having some trouble with their lease. The landlord's being unreasonable, and they need a place to stay for a few months. We thought it would make sense for them to move in here for a while." I nodded. "Okay, that's nice of you." Mom hesitated. "Well, that's the thing. They'd need the guest room." I frowned. "The guest room? Isn't that?" Dad interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "That's your room, yes. So we thought maybe you could stay in the garage for a bit, just until they get back on their feet." For a second, I genuinely thought he was joking. I let out a short laugh. "Wait, you're serious?" Mom's expression didn't change. "It's just temporary, honey. You'll still have your own space, and your father can help set it up nicely. We'll make it comfortable." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "Mom," I said finally, "you're asking me to move into the garage so Eric and Vanessa can take my room?" "They're going through a hard time," she said gently. "And you're single, you don't need much space. You've always been so adaptable." That last word, adaptable, landed like a slap. It was the same thing she used to say when Eric got the new bike and I got his old one. I looked at Dad, hoping for some sign that he'd realize how ridiculous this was. But he just crossed his arms. "This isn't up for discussion, Thomas. Family comes first." The room went quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of the fridge. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, pretending to look at her nails. Eric avoided my eyes. I swallowed hard. "Right," I said. "Family comes first." That night, I packed my things. It wasn't even that I needed the space. I had my own place. It was the principle of it. The way they said it, like it was perfectly normal to ask me to live in the garage while their golden child and his wife played house in my old room. As I carried the last box out to my car, Mom stood by the door, looking sad but not apologetic. "It's just for a little while," she said softly. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "A little while." But something in me shifted that night. I realized that in this family, being kind had always meant being convenient. And for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to be either. Over the next few months, I kept my distance. Calls went unanswered. Invitations declined. It was easier than pretending things were fine. Mom texted occasionally, usually to ask if I could come fix something around the house, and when I said I was busy, she'd send a passive-aggressive, "Oh, of course, I understand." Then one afternoon, I ran into Vanessa at the grocery store. She was wearing designer sunglasses and talking loudly on her phone. When she spotted me, she smiled like we were old friends. "Thomas, wow, it's been ages. How's life in your little tech world?" "Busy," I said flatly. She laughed. "I bet. Eric's been so stressed lately, you know? The commute from your parents' house is killing him." I raised an eyebrow. "From the free room?" She tilted her head, clearly not catching the sarcasm. "Oh, it's not free. We help around the house. We keep your parents company. We contribute." "Contribute how?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled sweetly. "Emotional support," she said. I didn't even respond. I just grabbed my basket and walked away, her voice fading behind me. But that brief encounter stuck with me. That smug tone. That unshakable confidence that the world would always bend around them. And then came the call. It was a Thursday night when Mom's name popped up on my phone. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound neutral. "Thomas," she began, her voice a little shaky. "We've had some unexpected expenses lately. Eric and Vanessa's situation has been harder than we thought, and we might need a bit of help with the mortgage this month. Just temporary, of course." I froze. "You're asking me for money?" "Not for us," she said quickly. "For the family. You know, to keep things balanced." I laughed quietly. "Balanced? That's one word for it." She sighed. "Don't be difficult, Thomas. You've always been the responsible one." That's when it hit me. I wasn't the responsible one. I was the fallback plan, the safety net, the guy they could always count on to take the hit so the golden child wouldn't have to. I ended the call politely, told her I'd think about it. But when I hung up, I sat there in silence for a long time. My apartment was quiet, the city lights flickering through the blinds, and I realized something that made me smile for the first time that night. I couldn't control how they treated me. but I could control what came next. And what came next would make them finally see me for who I was. Not the backup, not the garage kid, but the one who stopped playing by their rules. Because if family comes first, then maybe it was time to remind them what that really meant. That moment, sitting there in the dim light, phone still warm in my hand, was the first spark of an idea. The kind that starts slow but grows into something unstoppable. And they had no idea what was coming. For a while after that phone call, I tried to keep my distance. It wasn't about holding a grudge. I just needed some air, some peace. But with my family, distance doesn't last long. My mom has this way of making every boundary sound like betrayal. It started small, texts here and there. Eric's been so stressed with work lately. Or, Vanessa hasn't been feeling well. Maybe you could stop by and cheer her up. You'd think I was her son's emotional support animal the way she phrased it. I'd usually just reply, busy with work, sorry. But then she'd follow up with guilt-laced messages like, I know your job is important, honey, but family is more important. I remember one Sunday afternoon vividly. I just sat down with my laptop and a cup of coffee when Mom called again. Her voice was unusually cheerful, the kind of tone she used when she was about to ask for something. Thomas, you'll never guess who's here, she said. I sighed softly. Who? Your brother and Vanessa. We're having a little get-together. You should come over. It'll be fun. I hesitated. Mom, you know Sundays are my only real day off. Oh, come on. You're always alone in that apartment. You could use some company. Besides, Eric said he wants to talk to you about something. I should have known that last part was bait. Against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, Eric's car was parked right in front of the driveway like he owned the place. I walked in through the front door, and it hit me instantly. The smell of Vanessa's perfume mixed with the faint aroma of something burnt in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone, while Mom fluttered around serving appetizers. Eric greeted me with that fake casual smile he always used when he needed something. Hey man, glad you could make it. Yeah, I said, hanging my jacket. Mom said you wanted to talk? He chuckled awkwardly. Oh right. Yeah. We're actually thinking about expanding my business. I almost laughed out loud. His business was a vague social media consulting gig that hadn't made a cent in months. Expanding. I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. Yeah, but we're a little tight on funds right now. We thought maybe you could help out. Just a loan, you know. Family helping family. There it was. The real reason for the invitation. Mom jumped in before I could respond. Thomas, you're doing so well with your job. You have savings, right? This would mean the world to your brother. I stared at her. You're serious? Of course, she said. You've always been the reliable one. That word again. Reliable. The polite way of saying doormat. Eric smiled, clearly assuming I'd say yes. You'd get it back, obviously. Once the business takes off. What exactly is the business again? I asked. He blinked. You know, online marketing, social strategy, that kind of thing. I leaned back in my chair. So, nothing. His expression hardened. It's not nothing, Thomas. You wouldn't understand. Mom gasped softly. Boys, please, don't fight. I stood up. I'm not fighting. I'm just not giving you money. The room went silent. Vanessa finally looked up from her phone and smirked. Wow, touchy. I grabbed my jacket. Enjoy your get-together. As I walked out, I heard Mom say under her breath, I don't know what's gotten into him lately. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But with my family, it never ends. It just changes shape. A week later, I got a text from my dad. Come by the house when you can. Need to discuss something. I went the next evening, expecting maybe a talk about Mom being upset or something routine. But when I got there, Dad was waiting in the garage, arms crossed, expression stern. What's this about? I asked. He nodded toward a box in the corner. Those are your old tools, right? Yeah. Well, Eric's been needing some for his project, so we gave them to him. I stared at him. You what? He frowned. You don't use them anymore. They're mine. Don't get dramatic, Thomas. He's your brother. He needed them. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste copper. It wasn't about the tools. It was about the constant assumption that whatever was mine was automatically family property. I left without saying another word. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I realized something unsettling. My family didn't see me as an equal. I was a utility, a placeholder, the one they could rely on until they didn't need me anymore. Still, a small part of me clung to the hope that things might get better. Maybe if I just kept my distance, they'd start respecting me. That hope lasted exactly 2 weeks. Because 2 weeks later, I got a call from my landlord. "Hey, Thomas," he said, sounding awkward. "Your parents stopped by earlier today." I froze. "What? What?" "They said you asked them to check the place while you were out of town." I let them in since they said they were family. "Hope that's okay." I wasn't out of town, and I sure as hell hadn't asked anyone to check my apartment. I drove over to my parents' house that night, fuming. When I walked in, Mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine like nothing had happened. "Why were you at my apartment?" I demanded. She blinked, startled. "Oh, Thomas, calm down. We just wanted to make sure everything was fine. Parents worry, you know. You went through my things." "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "We just looked around. You live alone. It's easy for things to pile up." Dad walked in then, holding a beer. "Lower your voice, son. You're overreacting." "Overreacting," I said, my voice rising. "You entered my apartment without permission." Eric came downstairs right then, conveniently. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Mom said quickly. "Your brother's being dramatic." Eric grinned. Again, I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "You know what? Forget it," I said. "Enjoy your night." As I turned to leave, Mom called after me. "We were just trying to help." But that word, help, felt like salt in a wound. Days passed, but I couldn't shake it. The invasion of privacy, the way they dismissed it like it was nothing, it wasn't just about control anymore. It was about ownership. They genuinely believed they had a right to me. Then one morning, out of nowhere, I got another text from Mom. "We need to talk. It's important." I ignored it. An hour later, another. "Thomas, please. It's about the house." Curiosity got the better of me, so I called her. "What's going on?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Your father's been having some financial trouble. We're behind on a few payments. Eric and Vanessa have been contributing what they can, but it's not enough." I closed my eyes. "Mom, before you say no," she interrupted, "just think about it. This is our family home, the one you grew up in. You wouldn't want to see it go under, would you?" I hesitated. As much as I resented them, the idea of the house being taken away twisted something inside me. I had good memories there, birthday parties, late-night talks with Dad before things went sour, even quiet mornings with Mom when she used to make pancakes. So I said, "I'll think about it." But deep down, I knew what this was. It wasn't about saving the house. It was about saving Eric. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat staring at my ceiling, trying to piece together all the small slights, all the manipulations that had led to this moment. Every time I'd been told to understand, to be patient, to help out. Every time I'd been told family comes first, when what they really meant was Eric comes first. And yet, there was still a part of me, some stubborn piece of the kid who used to fix their fences and repaint their walls, that wanted to believe I could change things. That maybe, if I helped one last time, they'd finally see my worth. But life doesn't reward martyrs. It rewards those who know when to stop being used. A few days later, Mom invited me over for dinner again. I almost didn't go, but she insisted it was important. When I arrived, the house looked different. Cluttered. Boxes everywhere, papers stacked on the dining table. Vanessa was typing something on her laptop, while Eric scrolled on his phone. Mom smiled when she saw me. "Thomas, you made it. What's going on?" I asked. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been talking about ways to stabilize things financially." And Eric had an idea. Eric looked up, pretending to be modest. "Well, it's just, you know, the house is a big space. Vanessa and I could help take over some of the costs if we had ownership stakes." "Ownership," I repeated slowly. Mom jumped in. "Just temporarily. You could help cover a few payments, and in exchange, we'd put your name on the deed too. It's a win-win." Something about her tone made my stomach drop. "Wait," I said. "You're behind on payments, and you want me to bail you out so Eric can get part ownership?" "It's not like that," Mom said quickly. "It's exactly like that," I replied. The silence that followed was heavy. Dad looked down at his plate. Eric looked irritated that I'd seen through it so quickly. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about family. It was about leverage. About making sure I stayed tied to them, financially and emotionally, for as long as possible. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just stood up, put my napkin down, and said quietly, "I'll think about it." But in that moment, something in me hardened. I realized I was done playing defense. They thought I'd always be the one saying yes. The one moving to the garage. The one covering the bills. but they were about to learn that I had limits. And when I reached mine, I didn't just walk away, I planned. Because when they pushed me out of my own room, they thought they'd humiliated me. But what they really did was give me the perfect motivation to change everything. And soon, I'd get the chance. Sooner than they ever expected. I didn't go back to my parents' house for a while after that dinner. Every text from Mom went unanswered, every call sent to voicemail. I needed time to think. The kind of silence that lets your thoughts settle and the truth crawl out from under all the excuses you've been feeding yourself. I realized I had spent my entire life trying to earn a kind of love that was never conditional on effort. It was conditional on obedience. I kept telling myself that maybe I was exaggerating, that maybe they were just stressed. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't see me as their son anymore. I was their contingency plan. It had been about a month of radio silence when Mom showed up at my apartment. No warning, no text, nothing. I opened the door, and there she was, holding a Tupperware of lasagna like she'd just dropped by for coffee. "Thomas, you're impossible to reach lately," she said with a forced laugh. "Yeah," I said, not moving to let her in. "I've been busy." Her smile faltered. "I can see that." "Well, I thought I'd bring you something." "You've lost weight." "I'm fine, Mom." She sighed, pushing past me before I could stop her. "I just want to talk, that's all." I closed the door slowly. "About what?" She turned to face me, clasping her hands. "You know your father and I love you, right?" I almost laughed. That's one way to start a serious conversation. She frowned. "Don't be sarcastic. We've always tried to do what's best for the family. You might not agree with every decision, but you'll understand one day when you have children of your own." "Get to the point, Mom." She hesitated, then said, "We had to make a decision about the house." I felt my chest tighten. "What kind of decision?" She looked away, suddenly very interested in the lasagna. "We refinanced it. It was the only way to manage the debt. Eric helped with the process." "Okay," I said slowly. "So what does that have to do with me?" She hesitated again, then sighed. We had to use your name on part of the paperwork. Just temporarily." For a second, I didn't even understand what she meant. "What do you mean, use my name?" She started talking fast. "It's nothing serious. Just a small cosign. Eric assured us it would make the approval process easier since your credit is better than ours. You know how hard it's been for your father to get approvals since retirement." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You used my credit?" "It's not like that." "Did you forge my signature?" I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. She froze. That silence told me everything. I took a step back. "Oh my God, you actually did it." "It's only temporary," she said quickly. "And Eric's taking care of the payments. You won't even notice." I laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that comes from humor. It was the kind that comes right before something inside you breaks. "Do you even hear yourself, Mom? That's fraud." "Don't be dramatic, Thomas," she said, her voice rising defensively. "You're making it sound like we robbed a bank." "You forged my name," I said, my voice shaking. "That's exactly what you did." She crossed her arms. "We're family. It's not like we'd do anything to hurt you." "Are you serious right now?" I said. "That's your excuse? That because we're family, you can commit fraud in my name?" Her expression hardened. "You're overreacting. We did this for you. For all of us. If we lose the house, where would we go? You could have just asked me." I shouted. Her voice cracked. "And what would you have said?" I didn't answer, because I knew she was right. I would have said no, and that made me feel even worse. She must have sensed my silence because her tone softened. "You've always been the responsible one, Thomas. We knew you'd understand eventually." That word again, responsible. It felt like a curse now. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I want to see the documents." She hesitated. "They're at home. Then I'll come by tonight." Her face paled slightly. "There's no need. Eric's handling everything." "Then I'll talk to Eric." She reached for my arm. "Thomas, please don't make a scene. It'll just make things worse." I pulled away. "You already made things worse." That night, I drove straight to my parents' house. My hands were shaking the entire time. Every rational part of my brain told me to calm down, to gather information before losing it, but I couldn't. The thought that they'd used my name, my credit, my identity without even asking. It was like finding out your family had robbed you while smiling to your face. When I got there, the house was quiet except for the sound of the TV. Dad was in his recliner, half asleep, while Eric was sitting at the dining table with a laptop. He looked up when he saw me. "Hey, what's up?" Where's the paperwork? I said flatly. He blinked. What paperwork? The refinancing documents, I said. The ones with my name on them. He paused just a little too long before saying, Mom told you, huh? Yeah, she did. So I'll ask again, where are they? He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Thomas, you're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just a formality. You forged my signature, I said. He rolled his eyes. It's not like you were going to say yes anyway. I froze. You what? He shrugged. You're always so uptight about everything. We needed a quick solution, and Mom said you wouldn't mind. You forged my name, I repeated, my voice low now. He stood up, his own tone turning defensive. Oh, come on. Don't act like this is the end of the world. We'll keep up with the payments. It's not like it'll affect you. Do you even realize what could happen if you miss one payment? I said, it's my credit on the line. My name on that loan. He scoffed. You're being so dramatic. Not everything's about you. I laughed, cold, bitter, hollow. You're unbelievable. At that point, Dad stirred and looked over. What's going on? Your son committed fraud? I said without hesitation. Eric groaned. There he goes again. Dad frowned. Thomas, calm down. What are you talking about? They used my name on a loan application without my permission, I said. That's fraud, Dad. Dad's face darkened. Watch your tone. We're all under a lot of stress right now. I stared at him, stunned. You knew? He looked away. That silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I turned to Eric. You're going to undo it. Tomorrow. I want my name off that paperwork. He smirked. You can't just undo it, genius. It's already filed. My heart pounded in my chest. Then you'd better find a way. He stepped closer. You think you're better than us, don't you? Just because you have a decent job and a little apartment. You've always acted like you're above the family. I stared at him, disbelief curdling into anger. You used me, and you're still trying to make me feel guilty about it. Mom came in just then, holding her phone. What's going on here? I turned to her. You forged my signature. You all did. She sighed, looking tired. Thomas, please. Not in front of your father. Not in front of my... I started laughing again, but there was no humor left in it. You can't even admit what you did. Enough, Dad shouted suddenly, slamming his hand on the armrest. You're not going to talk to your mother that way. I'm not going to let my family destroy my credit and act like it's fine, I shot back. Mom's voice cracked. We did what we had to do. For the family. I took a long breath, my hands trembling. You keep saying that like it excuses everything. But it doesn't. Not this time. I turned to leave, but Eric's voice stopped me. You're not going anywhere until you calm down. I looked at him, then at my parents. The three of them standing there, united in silence. It hit me then. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. They'd chosen him again. They'd always choose him. I walked out without another word. The drive home was a blur. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I felt numb, and yet my thoughts wouldn't stop racing. How could they do that? How could my own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, put me in legal jeopardy just to protect my brother's comfort? When I got back to my apartment, I didn't even turn the lights on. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the faint glow of the city outside. I kept hearing Mom's voice in my head. Family comes first. That night, I opened my laptop and started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe legal advice. Maybe just something to make me feel less powerless. I ended up reading for hours about forged documents, cosigner liability, credit fraud. And the more I read, the more the shock began to turn into something sharper. Not rage. Not revenge. Something colder. Resolve. Because if they were willing to use my name for their mess, then they'd also have to face the consequences. And this time, I wouldn't be cleaning up after them. This time, I'd be the one writing the story. And they had no idea how far I was willing to go. The week after that confrontation felt like falling through fog. Nothing made sense at first. One day I was furious. The next I felt hollow, like the anger had burned through everything inside me and left nothing but ash. I kept going to work, but my focus was shot. My coworkers noticed. My manager asked if I was okay, and I just said I was dealing with family stuff. That was the safest phrase for something too complicated to explain. At night, I'd come home, sit on the couch with the TV playing in the background, and stare at the ceiling. My phone kept lighting up, texts from Mom, missed calls from Eric, even one from Dad that just said, "We need to talk. Don't make this worse than it already is. Make it worse." That's what they always said when I stopped doing what they wanted. Eventually, I stopped answering altogether. I figured they'd leave me alone. But people like my family don't know how to leave things alone. They just find new ways to twist them. It started with a letter from the bank. At first, I thought it was junk mail until I noticed the envelope had the name of my parents' mortgage company. I tore it open, and my heart sank. It wasn't addressed to my parents. It was addressed to me. It was a notice of late payment. 2 months overdue. I sat there staring at the paper, rereading it like maybe I'd gotten it wrong. But no, my name, my address, my signature printed on the documents. I felt sick. They weren't keeping up with the payments. And now it was my credit on the line. I called the bank the next morning. I didn't want to, but I needed to know exactly how bad it was. After being passed around from one department to another, I finally reached someone in lending who looked up the file. "Yes, Mr. Green," the woman said, her voice polite but distant. "You're listed as a cosigner. There have been 2 missed payments, and a third is due next week. Can I remove myself from the loan?" I asked, knowing the answer before she even said it. Unfortunately, not without a full refinance. Both primary and cosigner parties would need to consent, meaning I was stuck unless my parents agreed. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. It wasn't just frustration, it was helplessness. The kind that crawls under your skin and makes you feel like no matter what you do, you're trapped in someone else's mess. I thought about driving to their house again, but what would that solve? They'd just talk circles around me, twist my anger into guilt, make me feel like I was the one being selfish. Instead, I went for a walk. It was cold out, the kind of cold that makes you feel both awake and numb at the same time. I walked through the park, past couples and families and kids playing, and for the first time, I realized how quiet my life was, how small it had become, revolving around work and responsibilities and keeping the peace. I'd been raised to believe that being the good one meant sacrificing quietly, but all that had ever done was make me easy to use. Still, walking away felt impossible. I didn't want to cut off my parents. They were my parents. But every time I thought about what they'd done, I felt that same tightness in my chest, that same dizzy disbelief. I went home that night and poured myself a glass of water, then sat on the couch and opened my laptop again. I pulled up my credit report. It was worse than I thought. The delinquent payments had already been recorded. My score had dropped almost 80 points in a month. I just sat there, staring at the numbers. It felt like my entire future was being quietly dismantled by the people who claimed to love me most. That's when my phone buzzed again, another call from Mom. I ignored it. Then she texted, "Thomas, please, this isn't how family treats each other." I almost laughed. Then, before I could stop myself, I typed back, "Exactly." No response. For the next few days, I kept to myself. I barely ate. I'd go to work, come home, fall asleep on the couch with my laptop still open. I wasn't depressed, not exactly. It was more like being emptied out. Like I'd hit a point where even anger felt pointless. But one night, I got another knock on my door. It was Eric. He stood there with that same smug, slightly fake smile. "Hey man, can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You've got 30 seconds. Come on," he said, laughing like I was being ridiculous. "Don't be like that. I just wanted to clear the air." "Clear the air." I repeated. "You forged my signature, wrecked my credit, and dragged me into your debt. What's left to clear?" He sighed, glancing around like he expected an audience. "You always make things sound worse than they are. Look, the late payments were just a hiccup. Vanessa's been between jobs and—" "Stop," I said sharply. "I don't care about Vanessa's job. I care about you fixing this." His jaw tightened. "You're not the only one struggling, Thomas. We're all doing our best. But Mom's been really upset about how cold you've been." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is Mom okay? Did it hurt her feelings that she committed fraud and I didn't send her flowers afterward?" His face darkened. "You're so dramatic, man. You act like we killed someone. You didn't have to. You just ruined my financial future." "But sure, same thing." He sighed. "You've always had this victim complex. You think everything's about you. You've got a good job, a nice apartment. What's one little signature compared to everything Mom and Dad did for you?" I stared at him, stunned by how natural the manipulation came to him. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" I said get out. He looked at me for a long second, like he wanted to say something else, but then he just shrugged and walked away. "You'll regret being like this, you know," he said over his shoulder. "Family doesn't forget who turns their back." When I shut the door behind him, I leaned against it for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. That was the moment I realized something important. I was already the villain in their story. No matter what I did, they'd twist it. If I helped, I was a pushover. If I didn't, I was selfish. There was no version of this where I came out the good son. So maybe it was time to stop trying to be one. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I went to a lawyer's office downtown, an older guy named Phillips who handled financial disputes and fraud cases. I didn't even know what to say at first. I just handed him the bank letter and the loan documents. He skimmed through them, his brow furrowing. "This is your signature?" "No," I said. "Then you need to file a report immediately. This is identity fraud, plain and simple." I hesitated. "They're my parents." He looked up at me over his glasses. "That doesn't change what it is." I sat there, silent. The thought of reporting them made me sick. But so did doing nothing. "Can I fix the credit issue without pressing charges?" I asked. He exhaled. "Technically, yes, but the bank will need to verify that you didn't consent. That usually requires a police report. Otherwise, they'll assume you were involved." I nodded slowly. My throat felt dry. Mr. Phillips leaned back in his chair. "If I can give you one piece of advice, son, blood doesn't give anyone the right to ruin your life." That sentence stuck with me for days. I didn't go to the police, not yet. I wasn't ready to cross that line. But I did start documenting everything. Every text, every letter, every email from the bank. I made copies, took photos, organized them in a folder on my computer. And for the first time, instead of reacting, I started thinking. I didn't have a plan yet, just a direction. A quiet one. I started reading up on property laws, mortgage transfers, cosigner rights. I even called a real estate agent friend from college to ask hypothetical questions. At first, it was just to understand what I was up against. But slowly, an idea began to take shape. Something small at first, then bigger. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even let myself think it all the way through yet. But it was there, a spark under all the rubble. Meanwhile, my parents kept calling. Sometimes Mom's voice would break on voicemail, saying things like, "We just want you to come home for dinner," or "Eric's been trying so hard to fix this. Can't you just forgive him?" Other times, it was colder. "You're making a scene." The bank called us asking questions. "You're embarrassing the family." It was like they couldn't decide whether to guilt me or shame me, so they just alternated. I started saving the voicemails too. Every time I felt that old pull of guilt, the urge to call them back, to fix things, I'd listen to those recordings. The pity in her tone, the entitlement under it, the quiet assumption that I'd eventually cave. I didn't. Weeks passed. My credit score stayed low, my stress high, and my sleep almost non-existent. But beneath all that exhaustion was something steady, a slow, simmering patience. For once, I wasn't reacting to them. I was waiting for the right moment. Then one evening, while I was sorting through more paperwork, I got another letter, this time from a real estate management company. It was addressed to Eric Green. Apparently, he and Vanessa had applied to rent a house across town. A big one, way out of their budget. And the irony? They'd used my parents as guarantors. That was when I knew. They weren't learning their lesson. They weren't even slowing down. They were just moving their bad habits somewhere else. And my parents would follow them off a cliff if it meant keeping the family together. That night, I poured myself a drink and stared out the window for a long time. The city lights flickered on one by one. My reflection stared back, tired, sharper around the edges, but not broken. This was rock bottom. And it wasn't the kind you crawl out of by begging. It was the kind you climb out of quietly, with purpose. Because I'd finally accepted something. My parents didn't just betray me. They'd shown me exactly how far they were willing to go. Now it was my turn to decide how far I was willing to go. And I already knew the answer. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that it doesn't always feel like one dramatic crash. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, like watching your reflection fade out piece by piece until you realize there's nothing left but resolve. I'd spent my whole life reacting to my family's chaos. That week, for the first time, I started building something of my own. It started with small, deliberate steps. I went to the gym before work, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to feel control over something again. I cut out late-night scrolling, started reading every night instead, books about finance, property, personal development. I wasn't trying to heal. I was preparing. At work, I threw myself into projects I'd been avoiding. My boss noticed. Within a month, I landed a promotion, Senior Project Manager, with a substantial raise. It wasn't just about the title. It was about proving to myself that my life wasn't defined by their mess. I had built something on my own, something real. The irony was that as I rose higher, my family's chaos became background noise. Mom's text slowed down. Eric stopped trying to call. It was like they'd all collectively decided I was the difficult one and quietly cut me out. And honestly, that silence was the best thing that ever happened to me. With the promotion came a bonus, not huge, but enough to make me start thinking bigger. I met with a financial advisor. We talked about credit repair, long-term investments, property ownership. I told him what had happened. Well, the short version. He winced and said, "You'll recover, but it's going to take time. If you really want to protect yourself, start building assets in your own name." That stuck with me. So I did. I started small, a used car under my own financing to rebuild credit. Then, a few months later, I found a 2-bedroom condo in a good neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I spent weekends furnishing it slowly, carefully. No hand-me-downs, no family furniture. Every item had purpose. Every corner felt like freedom. I even hung a framed quote on the wall above my desk. Family doesn't end in blood, and loyalty doesn't start there either. But success has a funny way of echoing. When things finally started going right, that's when they came back. The first hint was a voicemail from Mom. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered, almost rehearsed. "Thomas, honey, it's been a while. We've all missed you so much. Your brother's business is really taking off now. You should come by and see the new setup. We'd love to have dinner together." I didn't call back. A few days later, another message. "I heard you bought a new place. That's wonderful. Your father and I are so proud of you. Maybe we could come see it sometime." Pride. That was rich. Then came the guilt angle. "Thomas, we're family. Whatever happened, we can fix it. Don't let something silly come between us." Something silly. I remember staring at my phone, reading that text, and laughing out loud. Still, I didn't respond. And then, 3 months later, I got a letter from the bank again. Not about the fraud this time, but about the house. It had been foreclosed. They'd lost it. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for them. But another part, the part that had spent months scraping my life back together, felt nothing but a cold, quiet sense of inevitability. They'd built everything on manipulation, and eventually, the foundation cracked. I didn't reach out. Not when the foreclosure hit. Not when they moved into a rental house across town. Not when Eric tried to post inspirational quotes on Facebook about starting over stronger. I just stayed focused. That's when opportunity found me. A coworker named Alex, who'd become a close friend, told me about an investment property going up for sale, a modest 2-story house near the outskirts of the city. "It's been mismanaged," he said. "Tenants left, the owner's desperate. You could probably get it below market value." I checked the listing out of curiosity and froze. The address was familiar. It was the house my parents and Eric were renting. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But when I looked closer, there it was. The same street, same layout, same front porch with the uneven step I used to trip on as a kid. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. My pulse was steady, but my thoughts were racing. I hadn't planned on revenge. I'd planned on peace. But sometimes life hands you both. Still, I didn't act impulsively. I met with Alex's contact, a realtor who specialized in foreclosed and rental transition properties. We talked numbers, strategy, legal processes. I didn't mention the personal connection. To him, it was just another deal. After a week of paperwork, inspections, and negotiations, I made an offer, low but fair. And within 2 weeks, it was accepted. Just like that, the house I grew up in, the house my parents had lost, the house Eric and Vanessa were renting, belonged to me. It didn't feel like triumph. Not yet. It felt heavy, like holding something that used to mean everything, only to realize it never really belonged to you in the first place. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even drive by for a few days. I wanted time to process it. But when I finally did, it hit me like a wave. The place looked smaller somehow, like the memories had outgrown the walls. The shutters were faded, the lawn unkept. There was a dent in the mailbox from when Eric backed into it years ago. I sat there in my car for a long time, engine running, just watching the porch light flicker. Then I saw Mom through the window, carrying a tray of food to the dining table. Dad was sitting in his recliner, Eric's voice faintly audible through the open window. It was surreal, like watching a movie I'd already seen 100 times. For a moment, I felt that old ache, the one that whispered, maybe you should forgive them. Maybe you can start over. But then I remembered the forged signature, the missed payments, the way they'd looked at me that night, like I was the problem for not letting them ruin my life quietly. No, this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about closure. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly behind the scenes. I met with a property manager to handle the transition. The existing tenants, my parents and brother, were on a short-term lease. I didn't interfere. Not yet. I spent that time putting my life fully in order. I paid off my smaller debts, rebuilt my credit another 40 points, and expanded my investment portfolio. Work was thriving. I'd been promoted again, leading a new department. My boss called me methodical, steady, the guy who always delivers. Funny how the same traits that made me the family's punching bag turned me into the company's backbone. In my free time, I started volunteering at a community tech workshop. Teaching coding basics to teens felt surprisingly rewarding. Maybe because it reminded me that helping people didn't have to mean being used by them. Slowly, I built a new kind of peace. A quieter one. Until the day I got an email from the property manager. Lease renewal period approaching for current tenants at address. Would you like to renew or adjust terms? I stared at the message for a long time. That was the moment everything came full circle. Because the same house where I'd been told family comes first, the same house I'd been pushed out of, was now legally mine. And the people who had once kicked me into the garage were about to learn what that phrase really meant. But I wasn't rushing it. I wasn't angry anymore. In fact, I'd never felt calmer. Because revenge, real revenge, doesn't come from rage. It comes from balance. From making things right without ever raising your voice. I drafted a reply to the property manager. Professional, polite, detached. Then I hit send. And as I leaned back in my chair, the sunlight spilling across my desk, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving my family's decisions. I was directing them. And this time, the lesson was going to be permanent. Buying the house had been the hard, boring part. The setup, the invisible scaffolding I'd built while everyone else was busy spending other people's money, was the easy, satisfying one. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't march in with a bullhorn or plaster. I told you so all over the mailboxes. I used paperwork, patience, and the one thing they'd never respected in me, rules. First, I covered my bases. I met with Mr. Phillips again and explained exactly what I planned to do. We went over landlord-tenant law, notice periods, what the property manager could and couldn't do, and, most importantly, how to make sure every step was airtight so there was no room for the family's usual emotional blackmail to turn into a legal snafu. I had the bank letters, the delinquency notices, the text messages. I'd documented everything since the signature revelation. That quiet file on my laptop? It was the only kind of ammunition I wanted to use. Next, I set things up practically. I hired a reputable property manager and made sure the rental agreement my parents and Eric had signed previously had expired. They were on a month-to-month after the foreclosure shuffle. The manager inspected the property, noted deferred maintenance they'd ignored for months, and proposed a fair market rate lease for the area. I asked for a standard renewal notification with one tweak, an adjustment to reflect market rates and the fact that the house had been neglected under their tenancy. I didn't inflate figures out of spite. I priced it to be clear, defendable, and, frankly, unavoidable. When the renewal notice went out, it was professional, sterile, no drama, no taunts, just the landlord's paperwork laying out options. Sign the new lease at the adjusted rent, or provide notice to vacate within the legal period. The manager did the delivery to preserve distance. I didn't want my face in the negotiation. My role was simply ownership. My only emotional investment was that everything be by the book. I slept badly the first night after the notices were sent, not from second-guessing, but because the quiet felt like an animal holding its breath. Then the call started. Mom texted first, pleading about the house, about the mortgage, about how could you. I ignored the texts and let the property manager handle the exchanges. That was part of the point. Remove the opportunity for manipulation. It isn't that I didn't care, it's that I finally cared for myself first. A week later, the property manager called me into his office. They want a meeting, he said. They're panicked. Your mother is in tears. Eric is threatening all sorts of. He stopped, looking at me to see how much of the family melodrama I wanted him to share. Keep it factual, I said. Tell them the options again. Offer a reasonable timeline. Give them a path to stay if they want it. I didn't say the words out loud, but this was the crux. I wanted them to feel the practical consequences of their choices, not the moral lectures they'd always weaponized against me. They came to the meeting nervous and defiant in equal measure. Mom cried. Dad tried to charm. Eric alternated between bluster and sobbing. Vanessa, as practiced as ever, folded sympathy and entitlement into a single expression. They pleaded. They promised. They asked me to remember family. They offered to pay more gradually, to help with repairs, to sign a long-term lease. Anything that sounded like commitment, but would still let them keep the place without taking responsibility for the mess they'd created. I set out a simple, legal option list, calm and businesslike. Sign the lease at the new rate, show proof of payment for the first month and security deposit within 7 days, and enroll in a property upkeep plan with verified payments, or provide notice and vacate by the legal deadline. There was a final line I didn't write anywhere official but said aloud. If you don't choose either, I'll have no choice but to pursue all remedies available under the lease. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement. When I told them the new monthly figure, Vanessa's mouth went into a small, surprised, "Oh." Mom's face went white. Eric sputtered. "We can't," he started, then stopped because numbers don't care about excuses. That night Mom called. She was sobbing, asking what she had done to deserve this. How could I be so cruel? Wasn't I his son? I listened. I let her have the monologue she'd used on me for years, the one that always ended with "family comes first." When she paused, I said the thing that had been sitting cold and perfect in my chest since the day they'd told me to move into the garage. Family comes first, remember? She went quiet. For the first time in years, there was no immediate attempt to twist my words, just a raw, stunned silence. It was the exact echo of the line Dad had used on me the night they kicked me into the garage. Hearing it reflected back at them, with the literal implications of ownership and legal obligation attached, had a weight I hadn't expected. It landed differently when it wasn't rhetorical. A day later, the manager delivered the formal notice. They had 7 days to commit to the new terms with proof of funds, or to give 30 days notice to vacate. The paperwork was clean. The language was clear. No drama. No theatrics. Just consequences. And then the call I'd been bracing for arrived. Eric, voice low and urgent, accused me of being petty and cruel. He said I was making their problems worse, that I didn't understand sacrifice. He warned me about family reputation, about things that sounded, in that clipped tone, oddly like the veiled legal threats he'd learned to throw around. But against the ledger of bank letters, against the stack of messages where my name had been used like an entry on a list, his warnings were hollow. The next morning, Mom showed up at my door, mascara smudged, clutching a grocery bag like some fragile peace offering. She begged. She cried. She said things I'd heard before, but the words were different now. Less about guilt, more about consequence. I felt a flash of the old urge to fix everything for everyone. It passed like wind across the room. I told her, simply, that there were options on the table and that I'd given them every chance to choose. Her eyes searched mine for the old son who would have blinked and said yes. I didn't blink. She left without agreeing to anything. And as the door closed, I realized the strangest thing. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight wasn't gone. The bank notices were still a problem. The credit ding still stung. But the obligation to silently absorb their mistakes had lifted. I had turned the power imbalance into leverage not to humiliate them, but to force real accountability. The lease and the notices were merely instruments of that change. Then, late in the afternoon, an email from the property manager popped up. A formal signed acknowledgement had been received. Not from my parents, from Vanessa. She'd signed a temporary agreement at the new rate. The security deposit slipped to the manager via a third party, and a message attached read, in part, that they would make arrangements and work things out. It was a small victory, clinical and measured, a legal foothold, a confirmation that my ownership meant something more than symbolism. It meant authority and a pathway to resolving what they'd broken. It meant they now had to live with the practical fallout of choices they had made for years. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, looking at that email, I felt the old twinge of unease. Vanessa's involvement via a third party smelled like damage control. Eric's insistence on keeping appearances suggested they were not done manipulating. And there was a part of me that couldn't shake how easily they'd slide from tears to schemes. I sat back, hands folded, and watched the sunset through my window. The revenge had been executed cleanly, quiet, legal, and fundamentally fair. I'd done what I'd set out to do. I'd put the power where it belonged and removed the easy loopholes they'd exploited. But as the sky dimmed, a new thought crept in, unwelcome and sharp. Doing it by the book didn't mean there wouldn't be fallout. They were not the sort to accept consequences gracefully. The phone buzzed on the table. It was Mom again. Her name on the screen looked smaller by degrees I couldn't explain. I considered not picking up. Then I answered. Her voice was small and raw. "Thomas, we just need time. Please. Can you give us time?" she whispered. I looked at the signed acknowledgement from Vanessa, at the bank letters, at the property manager's notes lined up like dominoes I'd set and pushed. I thought of all the nights I'd slept on couches, of the garage, of the way family comes first had been used as a weapon. "Time," I said slowly, tasting the coolness of the single word. "I can give you a little, but it has to be real. No more lies. No more using my name." There was a long pause on the line. Then Mom said, voice trembling, "We'll do whatever it takes." I wanted to believe her. I wanted, more than anything, to call her bluff and watch them scramble honestly. But experience had taught me their promises usually came with strings. And then, before I could decide what to say next, there was a sharp knock at my front door, not the polite rhythm of a neighbor, but the hard, decisive three that felt like an ending or a beginning. I stood, phone still in hand, and realized I had no idea whether the next person to step in would be carrying acceptance or a new kind of storm. It wasn't the police at my door. It was the property manager, folder in hand, face set in that apologetic expression professionals wear when they've seen too much human drama. He handed me a paper. "They've refused to vacate," he said. "We'll need to begin the eviction process." I took the folder. "Follow procedure," I said. "Every letter of it." He nodded. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I looked him in the eye. "They forged my name. They destroyed my credit. They told me to live in a garage." "Yes, I'm sure." The process wasn't fast. That was the beauty of it. It moved in slow, careful steps that gave everyone time to understand what was really happening. First came the official 3-day notice to pay or quit. Then the 30-day termination letter. Then the court filing. I stayed invisible through all of it. No calls, no messages, no visits. Just paperwork moving silently through the system like gravity doing its work. When the court date came, they showed up late, arguing in the hallway before the hearing even started. Eric tried to charm the judge, talking about miscommunication within the family. Vanessa brought a folder of photos of the house, trying to imply they were maintaining it lovingly. Mom sat in the back row, eyes red, while Dad kept glancing at me, like one fatherly look might still guilt me into surrender. But the documentation was ironclad. Copies of the forged signatures, the foreclosure record, the new purchase deed in my name, the signed lease they'd defaulted on. The judge read silently for a long time, then looked at Eric. "You were aware you were renting from your brother?" Eric swallowed. "We didn't realize at first." The judge raised a hand. "You signed a lease with his management company. That's legally binding. You're behind on payments. Unless there's evidence of improper conduct, the law's clear." There was a pause so heavy you could feel the air thicken. "Judgment for the plaintiff," the judge said. "Vacate within 14 days. Mom gasped quietly. Eric's jaw tightened. Vanessa's composure cracked just enough to show panic beneath the gloss. Dad just stared at the floor. They shuffled out of the courtroom in silence. I didn't follow. I waited 10 minutes, then stepped out into the afternoon sun, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, but balance. 2 weeks later, I drove by the house for the last time. The front lawn was empty now, except for a broken garden gnome and a stack of cardboard boxes left by the curb. The curtains were gone. The windows were dark. For the first time since childhood, that house wasn't full of noise or expectation or guilt. It was just a structure, wood, brick, and silence. My property manager had arranged for a cleaning crew and new locks. He handed me the keys that morning, smiling. "Officially yours, free and clear." I walked inside and stood in what used to be the dining room. I could still see it the way it used to be. Mom at the head of the table, Dad reading the paper, Eric talking too loudly, me quietly helping to clear plates. It was strange how nostalgia could coexist with relief. I went upstairs to my old room. The walls were still faintly the same shade of blue I'd painted as a teenager. In the corner, near the window, was the outline where my old desk used to be. I stood there for a long time, listening to the stillness. Then I opened the window, let the cold air in, and finally said it out loud, to no one in particular. It's over. A month later, I rented the house out to a young couple expecting their first child. They were polite, steady, and paid early every month. The yard was kept immaculate. Flowers grew again by the porch. The place had a new life now, one not built on guilt or manipulation, but on clean contracts and clear boundaries. As for my family, they scattered. Mom and Dad moved into a small apartment 2 towns over. The last I heard, Dad had picked up part-time work at a local hardware store. Mom called once, months later, to tell me they were getting by and that she hoped I was happy. Her voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. Eric and Vanessa didn't last long after that. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances that she'd left him after he racked up more debt under her name. He tried to start another consulting venture, but with his credit wrecked and his reputation gone, no one would invest. He sent me one email, half apology, half justification, and I never replied. I didn't need to. The last thread between us snapped quietly one evening when I got another envelope from the bank. This time with my name alone, no cosigner, no warnings, no hidden strings. Just a statement showing my accounts in good standing. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at it, thinking of all the years I tried to earn their respect, all the times I'd traded peace for approval. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate required energy, and they'd taken enough of that already. What I felt was colder, steadier, and infinitely more satisfying: closure. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into a folder marked resolved. Then I poured myself a drink, stood by the window of my condo, and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was learning the same lesson I had, just in reverse. That respect isn't given by birthright. It's earned by boundaries. And as I raised the glass to my reflection, I said it one last time, softly but certain, the words that had haunted me for years and finally belonged to me. Family comes first, but only when they deserve the place. My name's Ethan, I'm 27, and for most of my adult life, I've been the invisible backbone of my family, quietly picking up the slack while everyone else either pretended not to notice or flat out dismissed it. I never really asked for recognition. I didn't need parades or thank you speeches, but I did expect, at the very least, basic respect. Apparently, that was too much to ask. I moved back into my childhood home 3 years ago after Dad passed. My mom was never exactly the nurturing type, but after he was gone, she morphed into someone colder, sharper, like all the warmth in her had evaporated with him. She claimed she needed help around the house, and I, being the dutiful son, agreed to move in and shoulder the load. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. I paid the utilities, handled the mortgage when she was short, which was often, mowed the lawn, fixed the leaky roof, and even cleaned up after my younger brother Kyle, who was 23 going on 14. Still acting like the world owed him a break because he once got a participation trophy in middle school. It wasn't glamorous. I worked full-time in IT and freelanced on weekends just to keep our heads above water. Meanwhile, Kyle lounged in the basement yelling at his console, and my mom rotated between passive-aggressive sighs and full-blown emotional blackmail about how no one appreciated her. It was like living in a sitcom where I was cast as the overworked, underpaid extra who never got a line. Then came the boiling point. It was a Sunday, the kind of suffocating, muggy afternoon that already made temper short. I had just gotten back from a 6-hour shift fixing a server crash for a local clinic, overtime pay, but I hadn't eaten all day. I walked in, dropped my keys on the counter, and barely got a hello out before my mom stormed into the kitchen. "There you are," she snapped, arms crossed like she was about to read me my Miranda rights. "You left the trash overflowing." Again. I blinked, confused. "What?" "I took it out last night." "Well, it's full now, isn't it?" she hissed, jabbing a finger at the bin like it had insulted her personally. "This is exactly what I mean. You do nothing around here." "Nothing." I felt my jaw clench. It wasn't the first time she'd thrown those words at me, but something about that moment, the bags under my eyes, the ache in my back, the emptiness in my stomach, just made it snap different this time. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice level. "I pay for the lights, the heat, the internet you use to scroll Facebook all day. I cook, clean, fix everything that breaks." She cut me off, shouting now. That's just what a son should do. You think you're special because you do the bare minimum? You do nothing for this family. Nothing. Get out if you're so miserable. There was a moment of stunned silence. Even Kyle peeked up from the basement stairs like a meerkat hearing thunder. And I did something I'd never done before in my life. I said nothing. I walked past her, grabbed my laptop bag, my charger, and my car keys. She kept yelling behind me, something about ungratefulness and abandonment, and after all I've done. But it was just noise. Background static. I didn't even stop to pack clothes. I just walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove. I ended up crashing on my coworker's couch for a couple days while I sorted out a short-term Airbnb rental. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just left. That first night alone in the Airbnb was the quietest I'd known in years. No passive-aggressive slamming of cabinets, no late-night TV blaring from the living room, no Kyle screaming into his headset about lag. Just me, a bottle of water, and the hum of a clean ceiling fan. I thought I'd feel guilty. I didn't. I felt free. A week passed. I didn't hear from Mom. Not a single text. No apology. Not even a half-hearted guilt trip. Kyle, too, was radio silent. And maybe that would have been the end of it. Maybe I would have just moved on, let them figure out how to survive without their so-called useless son. But then, Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Kyle. I didn't answer. He called again. Then again. The fourth time, I finally picked up, more out of curiosity than anything else. Dude, Kyle's voice was breathless. Why's the power off? I leaned back against the rental's couch, glanced out the window at the peaceful street below, and said calmly, "What do you mean?" "I mean the lights are off. The internet's down. Mom's freaking out. We didn't pay the bill or something. She says it's your name on everything. Did you forget, or?" I cut him off with a laugh, small, bitter. "Oh, right. My bad. I forgot I do nothing for the family." There was a pause, then a stammering, "Wait, are you serious? You canceled the utilities?" "No," I said evenly. "I just stopped paying for them. Since, I apparently contribute nothing." And with that, I hung up. The voicemail started within the hour. At first it was Kyle, trying to play it cool. "Hey man, look, maybe Mom was just stressed. You know how she gets. Just come back and we'll figure it out." Then came the guilt. "I'm gonna lose my job if I can't clock in remotely. My boss already gave me a warning, dude." Then came Mom. First message, I didn't mean what I said. I was upset. You know that. Second message, how dare you leave us like this? This is so immature. Third message, you need to fix this, Ethan. You're the responsible one. Always have been. Funny how quickly I went from useless to the responsible one once the lights went out. I didn't respond. But that wasn't the end. A few days later, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. It was a photo of my mother, standing outside in her bathrobe, holding a flashlight. The caption read, "Hope you're happy." The image of my mother standing in her bathrobe, flashlight in hand, was so absurd I stared at it for a full minute before I even registered what I was feeling. Not guilt, not sadness, just clarity. This woman, who had shouted me out of the house like I was some squatter overstaying my welcome, was now trying to shame me into coming back. As if I was a delinquent son who'd abandoned her, rather than the one person who'd held that household together for 3 straight years while they pretended their entitled laziness was normal. Still, part of me waited. For a genuine apology. For even one message that didn't reek of manipulation or self-pity. But none came. Just a parade of voice messages and texts that alternated between blaming me for everything and begging me to come fix the situation. I ignored every single one. Instead, I called the utility companies and officially removed myself from every account. I made it clear that I no longer resided at that address and that all future bills should go directly to the legal tenant, my mother. One of the reps even said, "Wait, you've been paying for all this and you don't live there?" I chuckled and said, "Not anymore." I didn't tell them. I let them find out the hard way. A few days later, I got a long email. My mother must have found an old account of mine she still had access to. It was titled, "Please read." For a split second, my stomach turned. I thought maybe, finally, it was going to be heartfelt. It wasn't. It started with a recap of everything she'd done for me growing up, birthdays, rides to school, cooking, which she stopped doing when I was 12, and sacrifices, which I never saw. Then it transitioned into how family doesn't walk away, and how she couldn't believe I was so cold-hearted after everything. Then the best part, she wrote, "You think Kyle or I could have done all that technical stuff? You were supposed to help. That was your role. It's not about what you get. It's about duty. There it was. Duty. Like I was drafted into a war I never enlisted for. Like my entire adult life was supposed to be about paying emotional debt just for existing. I didn't reply to her email. Instead, I made a new one. To my landlord. A modest apartment had just opened up a few blocks from my workplace. Quiet neighborhood. No family. No freeloaders. I toured it the next day and signed the lease that same afternoon. And just like that, I started over. But the universe wasn't done stirring the pot. About 2 weeks after the blackout debacle, I was finishing a freelance gig late at night when I got a call from my cousin Jared. He never called. Ever. Not unless someone was in the hospital or jail. Yo, he said, sounding half amused and half stunned. Your mom is calling everyone in the family saying you've gone rogue or something. She told Aunt May you've had a breakdown. I nearly dropped my coffee. A breakdown? Yeah, Jared said with a laugh. Apparently, you abandoned your responsibilities and left them without power or groceries or something. Aunt May wanted to know if she should send over a mental wellness check. I sighed. Did you tell her I'm fine? Oh, I did more than that, he said. I told her everything. That you were paying for their bills, that you moved out because of how they treated you. She was stunned. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand over my face. Great. So now I'm the villain and the town rumor. Actually, Jared added after a pause, some of the family thinks your mom's lost it. Uncle Greg even said, it's about time someone stood up to her. That gave me pause. For so long, I had felt like the lone soldier in a family where no one else dared to speak up. But now, it sounded like a few others were waking up, too. Or maybe they'd always known, and just never had the guts to be the first domino. The next weekend, I drove down to the house, not to return, but to grab the last of my stuff. I'd left some boxes in the garage that I wanted before cutting the cord completely. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was how overgrown the front yard was. The grass, once trimmed like a golf course thanks to yours truly, looked like it hadn't been touched since I left. Mail piled up in the box. Trash bins overflowing. I knocked on the door out of courtesy, but no one answered. So I let myself into the garage with my spare key, grabbed my things, and started loading them into the car. That's when Kyle came stumbling out of the house, shirtless, clutching a bowl of cereal. Dude, he said, blinking like I was a ghost. You're seriously just gonna leave everything like this? I shut the trunk and turned to him. You mean, like Mom told me to? He rubbed his face. Come on, man. We didn't mean for it to get so bad. Mom's just stressed. She keeps saying if you just come back. I'm not coming back, Kyle. He looked lost. But what are we supposed to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The question I had spent 3 years answering for them while they lounged in willful ignorance. I got into my car, rolled down the window, and said, figure it out. Then I drove off, the image of Kyle shrinking in the rearview mirror as he stood there, still clutching his cereal like a lifeline. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning, because a few days later, I received a certified letter from an unfamiliar law office. Apparently, my mother was trying to sue me. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. It was thick, the kind of thick that says, we mean business. At first, I genuinely thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was mail for someone else, or maybe it had something to do with taxes. But there it was, in bold print, notice of intent to pursue damages. Sent from a law office I'd never heard of. My name. Her name. Right there on the front page. I opened it carefully, sitting on the floor of my new apartment, back against the wall like I needed the physical support to process what I was reading. The letter claimed I had intentionally abandoned my familial responsibilities, negligently caused damage to the household, and this one actually made me laugh out loud. Inflicted emotional and financial hardship by unlawfully terminating financial obligations without notice. Translation? I stopped paying for everything, and now they couldn't survive without me. They weren't asking for jail time or anything like that. It was a civil complaint. They wanted $4,200 in damages, which, according to the itemized list, included unpaid utilities, which I'd never promised to pay permanently, food costs for the month, repairs to appliances I had previously maintained, and even emotional distress. It was like they'd taken a blank invoice and scribbled every petty grudge into it. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel that old, familiar tug in my gut. That reflex to fix everything. That voice in my head whispering, just go back, Ethan. Pay it. Apologize for making waves. But then I remembered something. I hadn't broken anything. I'd simply walked away. I took the letter to a friend of mine, Talia, who worked at a law firm downtown. She wasn't a litigator, but she knew the ropes. She took one look at the document, laughed, and said, "This isn't going anywhere. It's not even a real claim. It's a scare tactic." Still, I wanted to be thorough. She helped me draft a formal response. Professional. Dry. The kind of language that lets people know you're not bluffing. I stated, point by point, that I was under no legal obligation to support adult relatives, that I had not signed any agreement promising long-term financial contribution, and that I had vacated the home by verbal request of the property's legal owner, my mother. I ended it with a simple line: any further legal action will be considered harassment and responded to accordingly. Then I mailed it. Certified. Return receipt. And waited. A week passed. No reply. 2 weeks. Still nothing. Then, one night, around 10:30, I got a phone call. Blocked number. I ignored it. It rang again. Then again. By the fourth time, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up and stayed silent. There was a pause. Then, "Ethan, it's Mom." Her voice was quiet. Not gentle. Just controlled. Like she was trying to keep her rage buried under a layer of forced civility. "I got your letter," she said. "So now you're threatening me?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm just not letting you push me around anymore." She was silent. Then she said, "I don't think you understand what you're doing. You're destroying this family." I almost laughed. "You kicked me out." "I didn't mean it," she snapped. "You know I didn't. But you don't walk out over a fight and turn your back on blood." I leaned against the kitchen counter, letting the silence stretch. Then I asked, "If you didn't mean it, why did you try to sue me?" More silence. Then, in a voice so low I barely heard it, she muttered, "Because you humiliated me." That stopped me. She wasn't sorry I left. She wasn't sorry she yelled. She was sorry people saw what she'd become without me covering up her cracks. I ended the call with just one line. "I'm not coming back. Ever." She didn't call again. But Kyle did. And this time, he wasn't angry. He was desperate. "Ethan, please. I know she's messed up, but I don't have anywhere else to go. My job cut my hours. I'm behind on rent. I'm trying to fix it, man." I swear. I felt that familiar ache again, the one that had followed me for years. The ache of being the only one in a family of people who never quite grew up. But I wasn't that person anymore. I told him I was willing to talk, but only if he got a job, moved out, and started paying his own bills. I gave him resources. Numbers. Even told him about a part-time opening at my company's warehouse. He thanked me, but he didn't apply. Instead, a week later, I found out from Jared, again, that Kyle had posted some long, cryptic sob story on Facebook. Something about being abandoned by the one person who was supposed to have his back. My name wasn't mentioned, but the comments were filled with sympathy and blind outrage. People asking if he needed help. One person even offered to start a GoFundMe. I was stunned. Not because of the betrayal, but because this had become a pattern. Every time I took a step forward, they'd try to tug me back into the pit. With guilt. With manipulation. With pity parties masquerading as apologies. And I realized something chilling. They didn't want me back. They wanted my services. They missed the safety net, not the person. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to war with them. I was going silent. No more responses. No more explanations. No more cleanup. I blocked my mother's number. Removed Kyle from social media. Changed my email. I even let my cousins know, nicely, that I was taking some time away from family drama to focus on myself. Most of them understood. A few raised eyebrows. But no one pushed. And then, I disappeared from their lives. But just when I thought the drama had burned itself out, I got a call at work from our front desk. "There's someone here to see you," the receptionist said. "Says it's your brother." I froze, because I knew exactly what this was. I took a breath and walked toward the lobby, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something colder. Anticipation, maybe, or disappointment, already knowing how this would go. I turned the corner and saw Kyle sitting on the waiting bench. Hoodie pulled over his head, duffel bag at his feet, hands wringing nervously. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he was still a tall guy, but like the air had deflated out of him. He stood when he saw me, eyes wide. "Hey." I didn't answer. Just raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. "I've been sleeping in my car." I stood still. "So why come here?" He looked confused. "Because you're my brother." I shook my head. "No, I was your provider. There's a difference." He blinked like he'd just been slapped. "Ethan, come on, Man, you know I didn't mean any of that stuff. I was just caught in the middle. Caught. I repeated. You watched me carry both of you for 3 years. You watched Mom scream in my face, and you said nothing. You took everything I gave and never once asked how I was doing. Now you're here because you want help. Again. His jaw tightened. I'm trying, all right? But everything just fell apart. I crossed my arms. No, Kyle. Everything just stopped being free. He didn't say anything for a while. Just stared down at his shoes. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy. So that's it? You're just cutting us off? Like we never mattered? That line, the one they always came back to, was meant to twist the knife. To make me doubt everything I'd built for myself these past few months. But I didn't flinch. You do matter, Kyle, I said softly. Just not more than I do. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And I saw it, finally, in his face. Not sadness. Not anger. Just understanding. The realization that the ATM machine had shut down. The free mechanic, the emotional punching bag, the household janitor, it was all gone. There was just a man now. A man who had limits. I won't leave you stranded, I said, my voice firm but calm. There's a church down the block. They've got emergency housing and job placement. I already called ahead. You can crash there for a few days and get help putting things together. But after that, it's on you. He looked stunned. You did that already? I did. You didn't even know I'd come here. I had a feeling, I said. He didn't say thank you. Just nodded slowly, like his world had officially shifted beneath him. Then he picked up his bag and walked out. I watched him go, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sort of relief. It was over. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, the city lights blinking in the distance, a cold drink in hand. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from boundaries. In the weeks that followed, things got quieter. The messages stopped. The family group chat went eerily silent. My aunt eventually reached out, told me my mom was telling people I'd gone corporate and abandoned the family. I didn't bother correcting her. Let her tell whatever story she needed to cope with the fact that her emotional crutches were gone. I did hear that Kyle found work eventually, manual labor, something part-time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. The church helped him get into his small shared rental. He didn't reach out again, and I didn't chase him. That part of my life had closed. As for my mom, last I heard, she had tried to guilt another cousin into moving in. It didn't last long. 2 weeks, I think. Turns out, not everyone's willing to live in emotional hostage situations. I started going to therapy. Weekly sessions, just to unpack the years of resentment, guilt, and misplaced responsibility I'd carried. My therapist, Dr. Klein, told me something in one of our first meetings that I still carry with me. There's a difference between helping and enabling. One builds people up. The other builds a prison with you inside it. I've been in that prison for too long. And when I left the door open, but no one followed. I got promoted at work a few months later. Lead tech consultant. My own team. I moved into a nicer apartment, still modest, but with windows that faced the sunrise. I made new friends. Started dating again. Life didn't magically transform into a fairy tale, but it became mine. Entirely mine. And sometimes, late at night, I'd lie in bed and think about that day, her yelling, me grabbing my keys, the silence as I walked out the door. It wasn't the day I was kicked out. It was the day I walked away. The day I finally chose me. And I never looked back.